I would like to open the meeting of the Governing Board of the Dixon Unified School District, January 21, 2021. I see no public comment, and the board will now retire to closed session. Thank you.
No announcements from closed session. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States
of America,
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Great. All board members are present. Notice to the public, persons wishing to speak to agenda items may present a request at this time. In the interest of ensuring efficient meetings and ensuring that they're structured as possible while held under the Zoom format, participants are requested to turn off their cameras unless making a public comment. Participants are not required to use their camera during public comment, but are encouraged to do so. Okay, recognition of, is there any public comment? No, okay, Tad, go ahead.
One quick question on your agenda. I see you have the James Marta Measure Q audit report up for discussion tonight. And I was expecting that to take place in a joint meeting with the CBOC. After all, we should review that before the school board takes action. Thank you.
Thanks, Ted. Brian, do you want to address that?
Sure. I think I may have crossed wires on that one. I apologize for that. I'll talk to Tad, who's the chair of the CBOC, on the side to explain that further. We do have a bond oversight committee that was rescheduled to next week, and perhaps we can get an accommodation with James Marta there.
Okay, great. Moving on, recognition of guests and presentations.
None this evening.
Okay, we have two listed. Do we still have two listed on?
Those are in correspondence.
Okay. Oh, sorry, I'm looking at my original agenda. Okay, let's move to correspondence.
Yes, so the first document is the Every Student Succeeds Act. It's a notification from Lisette Estrella Henderson, the Solano County Superintendent of Schools. And what this states for us is that we successfully submitted our CSI prompts for the County Office of Education, and those have been approved. The CSI is the comprehensive support and additional targeted support. This is a support that is going to Main Prairie High School, is where the CSI dollars are directed. And the second document is the eligibility for assistance under California's accountability system. So differentiated assistance is a term that we have used with you previously, and last year we've been in DA for 2 years, and what this provides notice on is that we'll be in differentiated assistance again. Essentially, everybody who was in it last year, they've just rolled forward or continuing because the process got significantly disrupted, interfered with during the previous school year because of the closures. So just two pieces of correspondence from the county office.
Okay, great, thank you. And we are now to the consent agenda. Is there any board comment on the consent agenda? DJ, go ahead.
My one question on the consent agenda was for the EdTech team contract for professional development, item F. Will staff be paid to participate in this professional development if it's outside their duty day, or is there other contract language? I know there was different contract language about like how many hours they could get and stuff like that.
Callum, would you like us to answer that question
now?
Yeah,
would you go ahead? Yeah, well, let me see if there's any, are there any other board comments on this? Okay, go ahead and answer that one, and then I'll
I'll
open
ask
for public
Mr.
comment.
Giramani if you could respond to that for us, please, sir. I think I know the answer, but this is in his world more directly.
Yeah, so it depends on when it will be delivered, obviously. If it's delivered during CPT, which is contracted time for professional development, professional learning, then staff will not be paid for that time, but anything that occurs outside the duty day, they will be timesheeted for.
Okay, is there any public comment on the consent agenda? All right, seeing none, I will entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Dave, I move to approve the consent agenda.
There's the motion. Is there a second?
I second.
There's a motion and a second. I'm going to do a roll call vote. DJ,
Aye.
Lloyd,
Aye.
Jewel,
Aye.
Melissa,
Aye.
and Lucas,
Aye.
and I as well. Motion passes. All right, consent agenda is approved. We did not pull any things for approval or discussion, so we're moving on to our stakeholder communications. Lucas, you are up.
All right, cool. Thank you. My presentation will be a little bit different today. So as you know, my role on this board is to bridge the gap between students at Dixon High School and the administration. So in order to do so, I'm going to allot a portion of my time tonight to my friend and fellow junior, Dyrene Chavez. Dyrene constructed a letter documenting her thoughts on behalf of her and her fellow students. This letter has been met with overwhelming amounts of support on social media, hundreds of likes and countless reposts also, which means to me that her feelings are not specific to any group demographic or anything like that, and shared by many students at our school. Due to my role at this board, I feel like I would be doing a huge disservice to the board, teachers, and students of Dixon High School if I did not give Dyrene the opportunity to share her words tonight. So that being said, I would like to welcome Dyrene Chavez to read her letter.
Okay, I just want to, I think that it's probably better if we do this as part of an agenda item.
Okay.
Yeah, as opposed to, I think what we're really asking right now is stakeholder communications, just kind of give us kind of a rundown, and maybe Dyrene, you can present as part of the agenda item when it comes up.
Okay, we can create that into an agenda item. That would be
I
better.
think what, Catlin, correct me if I'm wrong. So we have an agenda item later on the reopening, and I got to read Dyrene's letter earlier today, and I think it's appropriate that she share her letter in that agenda item tonight, and we don't have to push this off to a future meeting.
Yeah, that's what I mean. I just think that there'll probably be several people who want to comment, and so to highlight that comment out of context right now, I think isn't probably appropriate for the sort of cadence of our meeting.
Okay, sounds good. We can add Dyrene directly to that reopening area.
Yeah, Dyrene, when I call for public comment, then it would be great for you to just put your hand up either in Zoom or and we'll call on you then. Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Perfect. So I can just do what I was going to do after. All right. So I have an update about my meeting my weekly meeting on the Mondays. So we got a couple people at our meetings, which is great. And I feel like we really made a difference with those people. And we didn't have it last week because there was no school. But every single week after, now I will be hosting that again. And other than that, we're doing pretty well in leadership, and we are developing a second rally of the year, and that will be around February, end of February. So those are the two main updates for that. That's all I have.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All
Lucas.
right, Citizens Oversight Committee, Tad.
Hello, good evening, school board members, Superintendent Dolan, and members of the public. I'm Tad Smith, Chair of the Citizens Bond Oversight Committee. Our scheduled meeting for January 20th was postponed 1 week to January 27th. So if interested, please log in at that time. So I don't really have much of an update because we didn't have our meeting yesterday. Just a couple reminders. We're still one member short on our committee. And I know I've talked to a few school board members about that, and you have a few leads here and there. So I'd appreciate if you follow up on them if that would be possible. Also, just a reminder that my chair term is over after the May meeting. I have served as the chair of the CBOC for 3 years at that point, and according to our bylaws, I will have to step down at that point. Also, with the new board in place, I still need a board member contact that I can reach out to as my role on the CBOC. So thank you for your consideration. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Tad.
Thank you, Tad. Okay, employee association reports. Do we have any employee association reports?
I do.
Okay, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Kathy Michaels. I'm the DTA president. The Dixon Teacher Association has recently successfully negotiated a transition to a different model of distance learning for secondary levels that addresses, among other things, students' need for more teacher contact while covering more curriculum material with direct teacher instruction. The DTA continues to work on the following. We are discussing a viable kindergarten testing schedule in the near future. We are using input from teachers to develop an elementary hybrid schedule that addresses student learning needs while creating a safe, healthy work environment for teachers. We are working with the district to set and maintain stringent health and safety protocols for both teachers and students. This includes pushing for the adoption of all the most recent OSHA and California Department of Public Health guidelines. DTA is very concerned about the upcoming budget for Dixon Unified School District and will closely monitor fiscal developments in the district. Our first priority should be that our students get the best education and support possible from our district. We need to recruit, maintain, and retain the highest quality of teaching professionals. Board members and the district office should ensure that any fiscal balancing, especially in cuts, be made in a balanced, measured way. We expect the district to work with DTA to make equitable financial decisions in determining staffing, salaries, and expenditures across the entire district, including all DTA members and certificated staff, as well as administrators. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Kathy. Okay, any other employee association reports? Susie?
Hi,
Hi.
good evening. Susie Altieri, SEIU president, and I really don't have anything new to report this evening. We're still working on the same items as I reported last meeting. So as things unfold, possibly the next meeting, maybe I'll have something new to report. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, parent association reports. Are there any parent association representatives here tonight? Okay, seeing none, I'll move on to public comment. If you would like to talk about a subject that is not on the agenda, this is your time to do it. And we are limiting comments to 3 minutes per speaker. Is there any public comment at this time? Okay, moving on, Monique, you are up with the approval of the audit report for fiscal year 2019-20.
Hey, thank you. Good evening, President O'Halloran, members of the board, and Superintendent Dolan. This first item that I have this evening is the presentation of the 2019-20 audit report. Our auditors will be presenting this, Jesse Diol from James Marder and Company. And this is an item that we are asking for your approval.
Thank you, Monique. Good evening, everyone. My name is Jesse Diol from James Marder & Company. Are you guys able to see the share screen? Okay. Yep. I'm going to give you a brief overview of the financial audit results for the district. As you know, the audit is a process of accountability for the board and the public. The most important thing you guys want to take away from the audit report is on page 2 is our audit opinion. We issued an unmodified opinion. That means the financial statements were fairly stated as of June 30th, 2020. Following the independent auditors report is the management discussion analysis. You can find that on pages 4 through 10. It addresses the financial highlights and important trends and any issues the district is facing. I would encourage you to read the management discussion analysis. It is a Cliff Note version of what transpired during the year for the district. I did take a couple items out of the MD&A to share with you tonight. Focusing on the total assets, you'll see that we had an overall change of $1.4 million. That's an overall increase. And now what happened during the year is we just spent down some of those bond and certificate of participation proceeds and completed some of those projects. And so you'll see the current assets decreasing by 7.4 million, and then your capital assets net of depreciation increasing by almost 8.8 million. So overall 1.4 million increase. Focusing on the deferred outflows, that's just basically related to a couple things, pension liability, OPEB liability, and then the debt refunding. So overall, you had an increase of 955,000. The OPEB liability and the pension liability, we're basically relying on actual evaluations. And so whatever they're telling us is the deferred outflow related to the pensions and OPEB is what we're presenting on your financials. We looked at their assumptions and audited the underlying support, and we are in agreement with their estimates. And that's exactly what we did when we looked at the actual liabilities as well. And you'll see overall the liabilities did increase by almost 1.3 million, and most of that was in accounts payable. Further looking at it, it's mostly related to the bond fund, the building fund. And so other than that, focusing on the deferred inflows of resources, again, there's another piece that's related to the OPEB pension, and then you have some deferred premium revenue. So all in all, an increase of 638,760. You'll notice at the bottom, the net position is still negative, but if you look to the right of it, 447,000 was a change in net position. So that's good news. We're at least heading in the right direction. What I did want to kind of preference is, if you take a look at that negative 23 million and you extract out the pension liability, which is an estimate, that pension liability is about a little over 37 million. So if you took that out, you'd be at a positive net position. So I want you to understand that, yes, it looks, it's not a good news to have a negative net position, but if you take a step back and look at the pension liability, we're taking a proportionate share of the liability from the state of California. And so right now it is underfunded, and Dixon is absorbing a proportionate share and putting it on their financials. So just wanted to highlight that. How we got to the 447,000, wanted to focus on the total revenues. You can see that we did have a slight decrease, a 2.2% decrease in revenues overall. You can see about half of the revenues are from federal and state resources. We ended up with 42.8 million in total revenues. And then we had total expenditures of 42,355,955. And majority of that, about 73% of that is wrapped up in instruction related, and pupil services, in which with the size of this district, this is around how much you would see between 70 and 80% is what's spent on those types of expenditures. So that's how we got to the 447,000 change in net position. Now focusing on the general fund revenues, you can see that 81% of our revenues are from LCFF sources. That's about $30.6 million. The reason why I wanted to show this graphical is, you guys have over the last few years been in declining enrollment. And so a large part of the LCFF formula is the ADA. So just be mindful when you're doing the budgeting process. The next slide here is the general fund expenditures. You can see that we have a large portion, about 82% wrapped up in salaries and benefits. So just be mindful when you're doing the budgeting process. Wanted to tell you, I'm not going to go into too much detail here because I know Monique and Brian have talked about what's going on in the state of California. And I think later on tonight, they're going to be talking a little bit more about that. One thing I want to highlight at the bottom is the PERS and STRS contribution rates. They are really, they're going to stay high because we are underfunded. So again, just be mindful. There are new fundings coming because of the pandemic. So again, I'm not going to go into too much detail here. But there are deadlines. We will work with the district to ensure that the expenditures are spent within allowable activities as outlined. Focusing back on Dixon, this is towards the end of the audit report before we get into the audit opinions. I like to show this financial trends and analysis because it kind of focuses on where you were a few fiscal years ago and then where you ended up, which is in the actual 1920 column and then what you're budgeted for. And if you look in the middle of the page, the change in fund balance, you'll see the last couple of years we had a negative change in fund balance, but then in this fiscal year, we had an increase of 1.7 in the general fund. But then in the 2021, we are budgeted to have a 3.4 deficit. So that's the reason why I wanted to bring up, what's going on in the economy and why we need to be a little bit more mindful. And then the thing that you guys should consider here, and I think it's going to be covered later on today, the available reserve as a percentage of total outgo. Typically, for a district this size, you want to have at minimum 3%. This fiscal year that I'm reporting on, we ended up with 8.9, but you can see you have a negative 0.3%. So we do want to look at our budget and make some revisions there before the 2021 fiscal year ends. Focusing on the total long-term debt, you can see that we have been seeing an increase in the long-term liabilities over the last few years. A lot of that has to do with some of the bond issuances, increases in the pension liability, the increases in the OPEB liability. So just wanted to show that increase there, the trend. And then, as I mentioned earlier, there has been a decrease of about 154 ADA over the past 2 years, and we are budgeting a 34 ADA, a decrease of 34 for fiscal year 2021. So I mentioned you had an unmodified opinion on the financial statements. Along with the independent auditors report, we are required to have other communications. We had a report on compliance with state laws and regulations. That's the state compliance audit. We had a report on internal control of financial reporting and compliance. That is basically your control environment, the checks and balances at the district level. And then we have the report on compliance for each major program, federal program. And that's basically the federal audit. Anytime a agency receives and it spends over $750,000 of federal awards, grants and awards, they are required to have a federal audit. And then there's an internal control piece that's associated with that. And I'm going to report on all of these in the next few slides here. And then we have the communication with those charged with governance. In regards to the report on compliance with state laws, the state compliance report, no matters were reported. So basically, when we conducted the state audit, there were no findings. So we had an unmodified opinion issued. So that's good news. In regards to the report on internal control over financial reporting and compliance, we did note a deficiency. It's with the cash receipts. Basically, when we were looking at the receipts, we noted 3 items that were not deposited in a timely fashion. And as you can understand, during this year, we kind of scrutinized the internal controls more than normal because of the pandemic. From the auditor's point of view, this was going to be a time if something was going to go wrong. This is kind of when you want to, our risk assessment was going to be at a higher level. So we tested more and we just looked into everything. Overall, the district did everything right. I mean, there was no issue with these receipts. They just weren't deposited in a timely manner. From our point of view, we're always looking at what can go wrong. And so what could have gone wrong is these receipts could have gone missing, but they weren't. They were deposited, but just not in in accordance with the policies and procedures that the district has outlined. So we did communicate that with management. They have a game plan to track and make sure that the receipts are deposited within a week of when they are received, and they're going to continue cross-training staff at the district level. So we'll report back to you on the next fiscal year to let you know if that has been implemented, if there were any other issues associated with it. So that we noted as a deficiency. There were no other deficiencies noted with the internal control. So the district did do a great job in implementing other procedures because of the remote work during the pandemic. The next is the report on compliance. This is the federal audit. And so we issued an unmodified opinion on the federal compliance audit. And then there were no control deficiencies, no significant deficiencies or material weaknesses noted with the internal control piece of the federal awards. So that's good news there. And then the status on the prior year findings. We reported to you in the last fiscal year that there was a finding associated with the associate student body. That finding has been resolved. So we said that it was implemented. So that's good news there. The next finding was a state compliance finding with the comprehensive school safety plan. And that was implemented. The district did adopt the plan and any revisions before the applicable deadline. So we are clear there. And then the last piece that I wanted to mention was the report that we have to those charged with governance. And that basically is a letter from us communicating to you what the planned scope of the audit was, if there was any significant accounting policies that needed to be implemented, if there were any difficulties encountered during the audit, any misstatements that needed to be corrected or still remain uncorrected, if there was any disagreements with management. Basically, we didn't have any issues. The district did a great job in helping us give us all the items that we requested in a timely manner. Even with the pandemic, they were able to use the technology, the interface that we had to transfer files back and forth in a safe and secure manner. We were able to finish the audit on time and did not have any issues or disagreements with management. So everything went according to plan. And that's the reason why we didn't have to contact the board with any issues there. There are going to be a couple of GASBs that we are going to implement in this fiscal year. Because of the pandemic, they issued GASB 95. GASB 95 delayed the implementation of GASB 84 and 87 for 12 months and 18 months. And basically that means that in regards to the district, the associate student body accounts, they're right now report on a separate report under fiduciary activity. They are now going to be considered governmental activity. So they're going to be actually moving into the governmental funds page. And so that's going to be the change. That's with GASB 84 implementation, and GASB 87 implementation is in regards to leases. When we do help the district implement GASB 87, you'll now see the leases on the long-term liabilities footnote. You'll see it in the statement of net position, and any associated deferred inflows and outflows associated with those leases will be reported. And so I'll explain that to you when the time comes. I just want to conclude that the financial condition of the district has improved a little bit. The district is making sound financial management decisions, and I wanted to basically thank Monique, Rose, and the district staff for their efforts. They did a great job with only having that one finding. Like I said, this is a year when you're going to see issues just because people are working all over the place. The communication is not always as strong as it should be at times like this, but the district did do a great overall job. And so I just wanted to thank them for their assistance with the audit process. It was a lot of hard work, but we made it. So, and I'll leave it up to you guys for any questions.
Thank you.
Welcome. No questions?
No, I just have kudos to Monique and her staff.
We all thank you.
All right, seeing no board questions, any public questions? All right, seeing none. Monique, do you have anything else to add on this before we go to a vote?
Nothing else to add. As Jewel said, I want to thank, really it's a team effort to get us where we are. We still have room for growth, but I'm happy to see that per our audit report, it appears that we're headed in the right direction.
Great. Good. Okay, I will entertain a motion to approve the 2019-2020 audit of the district's budget.
I'll move.
So moved.
All right, it sounds like I have a motion and a second.
I'll second.
All right, perfect. Motion and a second. I'm going to do a roll call vote. Jewel?
Aye.
Lloyd?
Aye.
Melissa?
Aye.
DJ?
Aye.
Lucas?
Aye.
And I as well. Motion passes. Great. All right, Monique, we're moving on to your next item, the approval of the bond audit report for Measure Q.
I might just suggest before Jesse starts that we can bring this back for approval next time with what Tad mentioned at the start of the meeting.
Okay, yeah, why don't we just hear the presentation on it then, and we'll hold off on a vote.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Jesse, go ahead.
Okay. Are you guys able to see the screen there?
Sure are.
All right, so I'll give you a brief overview of the Measure Q financial and performance audit. I'm not going to go into the background. You guys are aware that we have a bond issuance and we're required to have a financial and performance audit. I'll tell you what the difference is between the financial and performance. The financial audit, basically, we need to present, basically opine on the presentation of the financial statements to make sure they're free of material misstatements. And so, and then there's an internal control piece that we have to look at the controls to ensure we have proper checks and balances over the bond proceeds. You do know that we have Series A and B issued, and so we have the full amount, 30.4 million issued now. We verified that when the bond proceeds were deposited into the financial system, that they were booked according to the authoritative guidance. And so that was good. We have the where it shows here deposited to the building fund. So basically this is going to be a portion that goes to the building fund, which is most of it. And then if there's any premiums issued, they have to go into the bond interest and redemption fund, because they can only go back to repaying the debt. So going to start with the balance sheet. So you'll see at the top we have assets, cash, and equivalents. So this is where you have the unspent cash, $17.9 million, total assets, 17.9. And then you have accounts payable. So this is basically any invoices that were unpaid as of the fiscal year end. And so this is just going to be the contractors and so forth, the vendors that are working on the projects. And then you'll see the fund balances. This is 100% restricted for the Measure Q bond projects. So $16.9 million is what's left as of 6/30. You'll see the revenue at the top there, 455,966. That is basically interest earned on that unspent money. And then you'll see we have salaries and benefits. That's just when you have a program manager, the project manager, we have to verify that this is directly related to those projects. So we verified that. And then you see the services and capital outlay. That's basically all of the projects, the money that was being spent on those bond projects in accordance with the bond measure text. And so we started the year out with 25.8 million, almost 25.9 million, and we ended with 16.9 as of June 30th, 2020. The performance audit, this is the difference. So we have to look and basically scrutinize all of the expenditures to make sure that they are 100% within line with the bond measure text. If there's any payroll, we have to look at it and really make a judgment call. Was this really in line with the bond projects? And then report back to you. So the scope is look at everything in that fiscal year, make sure that it matches exactly with what the bond measure text said. And we have to, and then we have a firm methodology of testing at least 85% or higher, just to give you guys peace of mind, knowing that these bond proceeds are being spent the way that they were intended to be spent. And then we report to the Citizens Oversight Committee. And so I mentioned the methodology. We do look at majority of the expenditures. We verify the mathematical accuracy. And then we look to make sure that they're in accordance with the full bond text. We understand. We make sure we have an understanding of an internal control structure. They do have to be basically recorded in a separate fund. This is going to go in the building fund, and then we track those resources to make sure that they're booked accordingly to the school district manual. And then we look at the bidding process, because that's where, if there were going to be any issues, it's usually with the bidding process, any change orders. We have to make sure that there's no conflict of interest with any of the vendors. If there's any change orders, we scrutinize that. We have extra procedures that we perform to ensure that they're reasonable. And then I mentioned the payroll piece and the salaries to contracts earlier. So did want to report to you, good news, all expenditures that we tested were in accordance with the bond measure text, so we had no issues there. And in regards to the financial audit piece, we did issue an unmodified opinion. The financial statements were fairly stated as of June 30th, 2020, and we did not have any control deficiencies. So along with the audit opinion, we had the three communications. The very first one is the internal control report. So we had a clean internal control report for you guys. No control deficiencies, no significant deficiencies, no material weaknesses. And then I just mentioned the report on the bond performance. No issues there. I am pleased to report that no findings on that one. And then we have the communication of those charged with governance, and that basically outlines the scope of the audit if there was any issues noted. And so since we didn't have to reach out to you, no news is good news in this regard. So that's what I wanted to report to you. And in conclusion, again, clean audit all the way through. And again, special thanks to Monique, Rose, and the district staff for their assistance with the audit process. And I'll leave it up to you guys for any questions.
Great, thank you. Are there any board questions? All right, I'm going to open for public comment then. Is there any public comment or questions? Tad, go ahead.
So I just have two quick questions. Were you able to review the question from one of our Citizens Bond Oversight Committee members? And the second is, roughly, how many hours did you and the firm James Marta spend on doing this audit report preparation? Thank you.
Can you repeat the first question? The answer to the second question is it's about 75 to 80 hours.
Okay, the first question was in November when this report draft was released, one of the members of the Citizens Bond Oversight Committee emailed back a question. I think Superintendent Dolan was copied on it. I was just wondering if you were able to review that question and had a response to it. If not, that's fine. We'll just take a look at it at a later date.
Yeah, I don't remember seeing the question. It's been a while. I can go back and look, and then I can give you a call back at a later time if that's
No,
okay with you.
We'll take it up at a later point. Thank you.
Okay.
Great, thank you. Is there any other public comment on this item before we move on to the next item? All right, seeing none, we're going to put this vote over to the next meeting. So we're going to move on to item number 3, Board Policy 3100.
Thank you, and I'm back again. So this is an action item, and we are asking that you approve a policy to establish a board designated minimum reserve for economic uncertainties. It was presented for public hearing during our last meeting on December 17th. Just a quick review. The policy recommends that a minimum of a 5% reserve for economic uncertainties would be established for the district, with the ultimate goal of increasing our reserve to a reserve that is similar to districts like ours, which is 17%, and that would be gradually over time. I'm open for questions.
Great. Are there any board questions?
I just, number 17 isn't mentioned anywhere in the actual board thing. It just says 5 and then growing after that, right?
That's correct.
Okay.
All right, any other board questions? All right, then I'm going to open for public comment on this item. Does anybody have a public comment on this item? All right, seeing none, we're going to, I'm going to entertain a motion to approve this board designated minimum reserve for economic uncertainties as a board policy.
I'll move.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. I'm going to start the vote with Lloyd.
Aye.
Melissa,
Aye.
DJ,
Aye.
Jewel,
Aye.
and Lucas.
Aye.
And I as well. Motion passes. Fantastic. All right, we are now on item number 4, the resolution authorizing the district to participate in the California School Finance Authority program for pooled tax revenue anticipation notes.
Okay,
Go ahead,
thank
Wendy.
you.
Thank you.
This evening, I'm co-presenting this particular item with our financial advisor, Rachel Chang Kawai. She is with Fieldman Rollap and Associates. I will provide background on why we are bringing this item to you, and Rachel will provide more details about what is involved with the TRAN and our request that we participate in the CSFA TRAN pool. So with this year's budget, the governor has proposed, which will be implemented, cash deferrals. Cash deferrals are basically an IOU for our state funding. We are to receive state aid through LCFF, and we have learned, and this will happen beginning in February all the way through June, we will not receive our entire apportionment, meaning our entire payment. The state has given us an IOU and will begin paying us for what they owe us next fiscal year. We will not be fully repaid until next November. So what does this mean for us? It means that we project that we will have cash flow issues beginning in May and June. Therefore, we will need to borrow money to be able to pay our employees and pay our bills. And so we are requesting that you authorize us to participate in a TRAN pool, a tax and revenue anticipation note pool with the California School Finance Authority. Rachel, would you like to explain exactly what a TRAN is and what that would mean for us, please?
Of course. Thank you, Mrs. Stavo. Hello, President O'Halloran, members of the board, Superintendent Dolan. My name is Rachel Chen Kuei. I was recently in front of you regarding your general obligation refinancing and currently assisting Monique and the school district with regards to this TRAN tax and revenue anticipation note issuance. Monique and I put together a few slides just to walk through the concepts of a cash flow borrowing. So if I may share my screen. Perfect. Can everyone see the presentation? Great. So as Monique mentioned, the resolution will authorize Dixon Unified School District to participate in the CSFA, or California School Finance Authority, tax and revenue anticipation notes. You may ask, what are TRANs? So you might have heard the terminology in the past. They stand for tax and revenue anticipation notes. They're meant to be short-term financings. The maximum maturity would be 15 months. Unlike our general obligation bonds or other financings that are longer than that time frame. The TRANs can be issued either tax exempt or taxable basis. Those are how the interest earning for investors are treated, their tax treatment. You can consider issuance of TRANs either as a standalone school district basis or a pool structure, such as the CSFA state TRAN pool that we're currently contemplating. These, similar to any other municipal financings, may be sold competitively or negotiated. There are very important accounting considerations associated with TRANs. They must be repaid from the revenues of the same fiscal year. For your fiscal 2020-21 that are currently being contemplated, you have to repay with your 2020-21 revenue collections. The repayment can be set aside and made during the fiscal year to follow. So you may ask, why are we considering the TRAN? As Monique mentioned, really, this is the IOU passed down by the state. We continue to receive better information from the state, but here is a snapshot. There are billions of deferrals from the state. Rather than the state dealing with its cash flow issues, it's being passed down to the district level. So many districts right now, similar to Dixon Unified, is contemplating what is commonly known as a cross fiscal year TRAN for the current fiscal year to deal with the estimated March to October deferral. As Monique mentioned, 5.5 million is expected for the school district. Many other school districts, unlike Dixon, that do not currently anticipating needing one, but many of them might need to contemplate a traditional fiscal year TRAN, which is to finance any cash flow needs that are happening during the fiscal year, July to June. So what are some of the characteristics and general advantages and disadvantages associated with TRANs? I'll start with the advantages. These are for cash flow needs, so no voter approval is required. Source of the fund is for temporary cash flow reasons only. And this is really the only method school district can borrow for cash flow or working capital needs. They are more straightforward and less expensive than other financings because they're shorter term. There might be some earnings in terms of investment, understanding that you will not need all 5.5 million at one, for example, in 1 month or at one point of time. There are also some disadvantages. They cannot be issued to generate additional revenues. There are specific tax law requirements that prohibit any districts from that. And that goes to the size of the borrowing is restricted. And Monique has been working with the state and their finance team to provide a lot of backup and cash flow projection in order to qualify for the TRAN issuance. And as I mentioned earlier, only the revenues received for that particular fiscal year in which the TRANs are issued for may be used to repay the TRANs. So Dixon Unified can certainly issue standalone TRANs, but contemplating a CSFA, the state TRAN pool, is a more cost-effective and time-efficient approach. And to go through some of the comparisons, the advantages are certainly that when you spread the cost of the financing to multiple school districts, that lowers the cost of issuance. There's also time savings because the state already have a program in place. Participating in it would be more efficient. With multiple districts currently participating in the CSFA pool, the size would be large enough to attract a very wide range of investors. Supply and demand, more investors, meaning that the interest cost would be lower for the participating districts. In return, there is limited flexibility compared to standalone basis. For example, we don't get to dictate the state's TRAN pool timeline when they issue, what type of information they need. Another example is Mrs. Stovall is currently having to provide the cash flow projection using the state's template, putting it in a standardized documentation production process. There is also less flexibility than the more local program. For example, my firm is assisting other county office of education for the school districts that are within the county. Sometimes they share more common characteristics, and having the county running a pool might offer additional flexibility than a statewide pool. Nevertheless, just to cover some of the details on the CSFA TRANs, this is end of the day a cash management tool. This can only be used to even out your cash flow needs. There's potential arbitrage and rebate obligation that the school district will have to track. And this is mainly to finance the state deferrals that are presented and upon us this year. We're limited by a lot of the state and federal tax regulations. About 4 to 6 months of lead time is needed to issue the TRANs. The low cost of borrowing, these are estimates since the TRANs have not been priced by the state, but the net cost to the school district is roughly $35,000. This includes all the financing costs, and this is a short-term financing interest cost. And right now that's anticipated to have a term of April to October of 2021. With that, I talked briefly about the schedule, but January is the deadline for individual districts to approve the resolution that is in front of the board tonight for consideration. CSFA's councils and finance team communicated to us their plan is to print/post the preliminary official statement, which is a summary offering document to start marketing the TRAN issuance. That will lead them to lock in the interest rates and price the TRANs in March and be able to deliver the proceeds by April of 2021, which per Mrs. Stovall is the time frame that Dixon Unified will need its cash flow funding. This concludes my presentation, and Monique and I are happy to answer any questions you may have.
All right, are there any board questions?
Yes, I have one.
Okay, go ahead.
Rachel, so let me get this straight. The state can't meet its obligations, and so districts are forced to borrow money. In turn, we're going to borrow $5.5 million, which is going to cost our district $35,000 more than we would normally if the state would just pay us off in the first place. Now, as a board member, I get it, but as a taxpayer, I'm outraged by this. I really am. I mean, the state needs to pony up and reimburse us for the $35,000 that we're going to have to spend in order to borrow money that they forced us in the first place.
Mhm.
I hear you. That is accurate. And unfortunately, that is the card that all districts are dealt with by the state, rather than the state trying to seek financings to solve their cash flow issue. It's being passed down to us and having to, and I think on the flip side, we're at historically low interest rate environment, that $35,000 might be much higher. Not to say 35,000 is little, but this is unfortunately the IOUs that are being given to us by the state.
Mhm. And to add to what Rachel shared, the TRAN is one of 3 avenues that we're looking at to address our cash flow needs. The first one is borrowing between our funds within our district. So let's say there's another fund that we could borrow a little money from. The second option is borrowing from the county treasury, and which an interest rate would be much, much, much lower, and the cost would be much lower. Our TRAN is our last resort. We do anticipate we will need to take advantage of the TRAN, but the exact amount may be lower than 5.5. And if interest rates hold, as Rachel is sharing with us, we hope that interest cost of 35,000, while very high, and it's not something that we would prefer to pay, we hope that it'll be lower.
Can I ask a question? So in the past, have we just borrowed from the county treasurer? Because we've had these issues before, haven't we? And this is the first time since I've been on the board that I've ever seen this kind of an option. So that what we've done in the past, and why is it this time that we have to go outside of the county treasurer? Is it because the deferral is so much bigger than over the past, 5 years?
Yes. So every year we borrow from the county. In Solano County, our county treasury is very supportive of the districts within the county, and they provide us what they call in this county a constitutional advance. So it's an advance on our payment, and we repay that in December and in April. And that has helped districts to be able to manage cash flow fluctuations throughout the year. This situation is quite different. This is a deferral. This is an IOU. This is saying we are not going to pay you versus we're paying you, or the schedule of payments, regular payments is, may create cash flow issues. This is saying we are not paying you. And our county simply does not have enough money to be able to support all of the other districts in Solano County. So they can provide some support, and then school districts need to look at other avenues in order to be able to fill in that cash flow gap of the money that they simply are not receiving until next year. The deferral, meaning the IOU, I like using that term, this is not the first time that they did it. We actually had a deferral of our payment last June. Thankfully, within our district, we were able to do interfund borrowing to be able to not have to seek a loan. But these deferrals are so large that we do need to go to an outside source to borrow money. Mr. Dillon, you may be able to help me with the timing, but this isn't the first time our district has issued a trans, is it?
No, it's not. And I don't remember the exact last year, but certainly during the Great Recession time when deferrals were multiple years, virtually everybody across the state was in the position of needing to set up trans at that point in time. So that's been a number of years. And Melissa, you're right. We haven't done one of these since you have been on board. Thankfully, times have been better and we haven't been dealing with the deferrals in particular, but were it not for the deferrals, we wouldn't be bringing this item to you tonight.
So I have a question. I think you mentioned that we had to pay it back in November. Now, is that November of 21 or November of 22? By November?
Go ahead, Rachel.
That is
anticipated for 2021. And to participate in the state's program, the state has what it calls intercept. Before the revenue is distributed to Dixon Unified, the state will intercept the deferred revenues for the repayment of the trans directly. And that is anticipated to be October to November 2021 timeframe.
Okay.
I have one more question. If we had a larger reserve, like say the 17% that might be our ultimate goal, then we wouldn't need something like this, correct? Because we could use that reserve to tie us over until we get more funding. Is that correct?
Well, that was the exact question that I was going to ask. So great minds think alike.
So what if we had a larger reserve, we would be in a better financial position, period. But what's important about this is cash. Not just, what's on the books, what money is owed to us, what money, there's a difference between budgeting the cash that we are to receive. And there's another part of it where it's really, for lack of better words, booking it. And so, yes, if we had a larger reserve and we had a larger cash reserve, we wouldn't be in this situation. But it really deals with cash flow, money in the bank. Reserve and cash
different
amounts are two different pots.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because I would point out with the deferral, we have to book that as revenue in this fiscal year, despite the fact it's not going to come, right? So that's the whole premise of the deferral is we have to report it as if we've received it when we haven't received it. Therefore, the cash issue, right? So I can't think of any similar situation other than, no, it doesn't even work. Post-dated check, because you don't book that as income, you're holding it. So it's just a really kind of a preposterous method, and Lloyd expressed it very accurately, the frustration that people have over this. But the fact that we have to book this as revenue when we haven't received it yet yeah. Shake my head.
My two things. One is just yeah, it's tragic and whatnot, but 0.6% interest rate isn't the worst I've heard. So it's at least fathomable. The second comment I was going to make was I heard that other districts are also going to apply and pool it together, and that was going to help the Tran get purchased and whatnot. And so I didn't know if any other local districts had formally done this process as well already.
Not to my knowledge, not in our immediate area. However, that could change. It could be something they're still considering.
All right, other board questions before, go ahead, Lucas.
Well, I just have, go ahead, Lucas.
You'll let Lucas go first and then I'll call on you.
Yeah, that's fine.
So is there something that we could put in place specifically to get it up to 35,000 in of interest expense? Is there anything specific? Oh,
sorry, Lucas, to clarify the question, are you asking for a breakdown of the 35,000?
Yeah, basically.
So this is when I get into a lot more details on the functions of municipal bonds. So municipal bonds are issued with a interest rate called the coupon, as well as the yield on the bonds. So there's a difference in the current market. You will see the trans will likely be structured as premium bonds. I know I might be sounding like speaking a foreign language, but that's a important function because by issuing the Tran, there will be bond premium generated. So that bond premium will be a part of the available proceeds to Dixon Unified. So if you were to look at, so the net interest cost is roughly 0.2 to 0.5%, but the coupon is likely to be 2 or 3%. So when you mix all the premium calculations together, but that is available for future repayment, and the financing cost all mix into that. So if you're asking for the financing cost specifically, I have it right here. The financing cost is $22,300. That is an estimate provided by the state Trample team. And the tax exempt interest cost, the total interest payment is roughly $154,000. But when you took out the premium, $141,000 being issued, the net cost to the school district is roughly $35,000.
Okay.
I hope that breakdown helps answer
Yeah.
the question.
That made more sense. Yeah.
Great. Okay, Jewel?
Well, I just have a comment that since the timeline is our January 2021 board meeting, it would be very difficult to look around and try to partner with other districts. I don't think we have the time. So whether I don't like it, but I don't see that we have an option.
All right. Any other board comments before I open for public comment?
If I can just clarify, and Rachel, Monique, straighten me out if I'm wrong. So the idea of partnering is inherent in this model. So it's not that a district has to go out and find just other districts to partner with. By adopting this resolution and us participating in the program, then that partnership happens on the natural for everybody who joins into this approach. Is that accurate, Rachel, Monique?
Yes, that's accurate. So
Okay.
This is an opportunity to enter into a pool with districts throughout California so that we can get the best, for lack of better words, bang for our buck.
That helps.
Okay.
Great, thank you. All right, I'm going to go ahead and open for public comment. Is there any public comment on this item, on this resolution? All right, seeing no public comment, I will entertain a motion on the resolution.
I'll move.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
I second.
There's been a motion and a second. We're going to do a roll call vote. DJ?
Aye.
Melissa?
Aye.
Lloyd?
Aye.
Jewel?
Aye.
Lucas?
Aye.
And I as well. So that motion passes. Thank you for your presentation.
Thank you, Rachel.
Thank you.
We're moving on to an informational item on the CARES update of the CARES expenditures.
Yes, this is an information item, as was just shared. It's an update on CARES expenditures from July 1 to December 30th, 2020. In essence, we have expended all of the funds, expended or encumbered all of the funds that needed to spend by the then deadline of December 30th, which has now been extended, the deadline. But we as our district, we did expend and obligate all of our funds. Our next expenditure deadline is the end of this fiscal year, and we do anticipate that we will expend all of those funds.
Great.
Questions?
Thank you. Are there any questions on any board questions?
I did have a question about one of the purchases. I know at one point we had talked about this partitions or plastic, whatever, to go in between students' desks, that maybe we were holding off on that. Did we actually purchase that as part of our funds that we spent, or do we still need to purchase that?
We have made that purchase. Yes, I
Okay.
confirmed with Mark today that we did make that purchase.
All right, thank you.
Plexiglass, and plexiglass is the material being used, Melissa.
So if I can jump in just for a second, the plexiglass has been ordered. It's in the warehouse. The maintenance guys are now making the student desk plexiglass. We've got plexiglass at the school sites in the front office, and we'll start making the plexiglass barriers for our teachers here shortly.
But but we did get enough of the plexiglass to go for desks, for students' desks as well, right? That was
Correct.
what my question was. Okay.
Yeah. We got 650 4x8 sheets. It came on 4 pallets at about 8 tons.
Is that for the high school or for all of the grades?
That's for all students.
Oh, okay.
All right.
Can't
Other
wait to
questions?
see how Miss Max flexible seating is going to work with plexiglass.
All right. Other questions on this item? All right. Is there any public comment on this item? All right. Seeing none, we're going to move on to number 6, the governor's budget.
Thank you. This is my last item, and it's an information item. And I will be providing highlights from the governor's budget. The budget, sometimes we call it just a little handout, was included in the board packet. And what I'll do with you this evening is just give some high-level highlights of the budget. I'd like to begin by sharing some overall themes of the budget. First and foremost, there was revenue growth that surpassed any of the original projections that we had. If you recall, last May, we were getting information that the funding just would be even worse than we could have ever imagined. Thankfully, come July, we found a reprieve. And based upon the governor's January budget, we do see some rays of hope. However, I want to caution us from getting too optimistic, because there's a lot of time between now and May and then July when the budget is enacted. Many, many things have changed. And as we have experienced over the last year, what happened last week could be very different from next week. And so we want to be mindful that in our district, we are still experiencing a decline in enrollment. And in our area, we are still seeing challenges with housing for our community. And so we want to make sure that we're very cautious and realistic when we do look at the governor's budget proposal. The governor did not include any of the federal stimulus provisions that passed in late December. That's because the governor's budget is pretty much done by the end of December. And so that wasn't included in the budget. We do anticipate that in his May revise, and for a little background, the governor submits his proposed budget for the 2021 year in January. The legislatures and stakeholders have conversations, and then a revised budget is shared in May, and then they have more conversations, and then we have the enacted budget in July. We anticipate come May that the federal stimulus and any other stimulus packages that may come between now and then will be included in that budget. Also, in the budget, it's not anticipated that our California economy will recover until about 2025. So we have several years where we may have some tough years coming ahead of us. And the last theme is the governor's budget assumes that we will return to in-person instruction. So we're back in the classroom, we're back at school. That's the premise of it. Okay. Let's first talk revenue. In our current budget and in the first interim that I shared with you all last December, we projected that we would have a zero COLA, zero cost of living adjustment, meaning no additional funding coming to us for next year or the next few years. In this budget for next year, they are projecting that we would have what we're calling a catch-up of the COLA. So the COLA that we would have gotten this year, plus next year's COLA, that is what's included in the governor's budget. And that's a 3.84% COLA. That's a pretty good COLA. We will have to see if that comes to reality as they finish their conversations. Next, I'd like to talk about the cash deferrals. We just had a conversation on cash deferrals. Cash deferrals is basically an IOU. Originally, from this year's budget, the governor projected that we would still have the cash deferrals next year. So the state would issue an IOU even next February through June. The new proposal eliminates about 2/3 of those cash deferrals, meaning that we may only need to borrow money in June of next year. And depending on how our financial situation goes, we may not need to borrow money at all. Okay. Next is special education. As we know, this particular governor is very invested in special education and is proposing about $300 million more of ongoing money, meaning money that will get year after year to support special education. The next part of this, and this is a big part of his proposal that's getting a lot of conversation, is the early return to school. We've heard some people call it some people are referring to it, and he is referring to it as well, as the Safe Schools for All proposal. This is proposing that for those districts who get students back to school as early as February, there's additional money available for those particular schools. The legislature still needs to take action on this and still needs to have conversation about this to determine exactly what that would look like for schools and what that funding might be. Another avenue to be able to support our students that's within the budget is an expanded learning time grant. The governor is proposing about $4.6 billion of one-time, meaning we get it and it's gone, monies to help support our most vulnerable students, our students who are identified as low income, foster, or homeless. And in summary, in essence, we're seeing from this particular budget a pretty good amount of money that could be directed towards schools. As I said at the beginning, there's a lot to be seen between now and May, and then ultimately July. We also know that, as I said before, our district is in declining enrollment, and so I caution us about being too optimistic. And as we go into planning the assumptions, meaning exactly what we think might happen in our second interim budget, which is our next quarterly budget, as I like to call it, that is in March, we'll need to take these factors into consideration and make sure that we are, in my recommendation, being conservative in our projections so that we can be able to support our students. What questions do you have?
I have a couple of different ones. I guess not necessarily for Monique, but just for anyone that needs the answer or would be interested in answering is, does this district have an interest in applying for those extended learning time grants or continuing education? Basically, I envision that as like a Saturday school type thing, summer school type things, something along those nature, because, you know, we're facing an unprecedented growing learning gap, especially with students that Monique named, you know, people with worse internet and other just a million issues that could happen. So I just want to hear, I guess, if there's a commitment to applying for those grants and what the plan could be.
Yes, is the answer. I can keep it that brief in an unusual twist. We'll go after every possible source of support that exists.
I guess my follow-up would be, can I expect some sort of update on that at some point, maybe by the next board meeting or 2 board meetings or so, or?
Yeah, as we, you know, we're continuing to get information on this. We got a projected dollar figure. Was that yesterday or today, Monique?
Yesterday.
Yeah, just yesterday. So the early projections are often off target. So we're waiting to see some more refined information. But yeah, we're absolutely committed to using every available resource that we can get our hands on. And as we get more information, we'll certainly bring that to you.
And I was just going to add that I think the Linda Darling-Hammond, the president of the state board, talked about this just as looking at it as a different way of educating, that maybe we've been in a traditional way of educating in a really agrarian society, and perhaps where, we should consider shifting to other ways of doing that. And I think it's important just to sort of keep that in mind and keep an expanded view of what we've done in the past and what we may do in the future.
I agree with that.
Great. Any other questions from the board on this item?
I could keep going. I can go all night. One, I guess I have two more, I guess. Monique mentioned the Safe Schools for All, and I don't know if this is the right time to say it because it was technically presented at the same time as the budget. So, it's part of it, I guess. But I just feel the need to mention that the ADA, the extra ADA that can be earned can be paid to staff salaries for people that report in person. So I just want to, I guess, state that for the record. It probably at this point doesn't look like it will be because it's going to be mostly toward testing. But the last thing would be, I know that there's a thing on community schools, and that's a little confusing because there's something else called community schools that like counties run. So I guess I'm a little confused about which community schools this is, and if we would be interested in, if it is what I think it is, I don't know if I know what it is, if the site C.A. Jacobs could be of use to facilitate a community school for this community.
Yeah, I'll tell you, I don't know a great deal about the community school model at this point in time. I've seen a little bit on it as well. The community day school model, I think, is what's in your head, DJ. That's an alternative education setting. Golden Hills out in the neck of the woods where you work. So that's a place where students, some of them it's attendance issues, some other issues impeding their success in school, and for some expelled students would attend there. The idea behind the community schools is really a full service approach with healthcare, mental health supports, family education, trainings, really bringing in outside groups as well. So yeah, I think as we talk about ways, attractive models in the district, that's something we would be open to. I know Vallejo, Jewel can probably speak to it, had community school model that unfortunately I think has largely receded over time. They can be difficult. They're brilliant in concept. I think they can be difficult to maintain some of the partnerships involved in them.
I was just thinking like it was great timing. We had a site open up and we had these funds we could apply for that could get used to it. And I think it'd be great for the community. So I was just throwing it out there.
No, thank you.
All right, other board questions on this item? All right, I'm going to go ahead and open for public comment then on the item. John Geyer, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Monique, you mentioned that the governor had a timetable mentioned for return to in-class instruction for all schools, and I missed what that timetable was. What was it?
So I'm going to speak to the Safe Schools for All plan in the next item, John, if that's okay. With you. Yeah, okay. I'll share those then.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, any other comments on this item? All right, and this was informational, so we don't need a vote on it. And I'm going to move on to the update on the reopening of school for the 2020-21 school year.
Great. Mr. Monticello, can you allow me to share my screen, please? So I'm going to touch on three things here this evening. And the first is that Safe School for All plan has been mentioned a couple times tonight. The second is just our general planning within the district on return to school. And then we're going to talk a little bit about the changes coming next week as we have some significant change happening in the secondary school setting in particular with instructional program / model, and then the shift of our asynchronous day from Monday to Wednesday as well. So first thing I'll touch on is the Safe Schools for All plan. So the governor rolled this out on December 30th, and quite honestly, there has not been a lot that has happened with regards to it since. I'll talk about that in a moment. And the concept behind this proposal was to assist school districts in reopening. And there's a deadline of, at least in theory, there's a deadline of February 1st by which districts would have to submit their safety plans to their county office of educations, and also the bargaining unit agreements that were established regarding the return to school. So the two thresholds for returning, TK through second grades had to be in school no later than February 15th. Third through fifth grade in Dixon, it actually, in the proposal, it's third through sixth grade, if sixth grade is in the elementary setting, by March 15th. The proposal, as he established it originally, had no provisions for middle or high school reopening. That would be left to districts outside of the Safe Schools for All plan model. There also was an element regarding the special populations, so students with disabilities, students receiving mental health services, some of the other groups who receive specialized services, potentially English learners and so on. So proposed on December 30th, and deadlines, which at this point in time, to some degree, remain intact for just about a week and a half. So what's the current status? The current status on this is that in the state Senate today, the first hearing on the proposal was conducted. And in the state assembly, the first hearing will be conducted early next week. So for legislation that really needs to be adopted on January 29th, or let's even play around and say February 1st, for those familiar with the legislative process, and not just in California, but anywhere, work of the size and scope that is involved in this particular plan at a cost of about $2 billion projected, is not going to be done in the next week. It's not going to be done in the next 2 weeks. It's really, we just don't know. It could take an extended amount of time. There have been a lot of concerns expressed, especially recently by districts and the management and advocacy groups within the state. Those types of groups are the California School Board Association, the Association of California School Administrators, the California Association of School Board, of School Business Officials, the County Superintendents Association as well. So they issued a letter just a couple days ago, really calling on the governor to make significant revisions to this proposal at this point in time. So the nature of concerns being expressed, just how quickly this has to be done, that February 1st, as of the moment, getting the collective bargaining requirements met. There are standards for testing included in his proposal, which are really concerning to us in our ability to meet them. Depending on the number of cases in your region, you could be required under this model to test all students and staff on a weekly basis. And I will be honest that I don't believe school districts should be in have a testing responsibility, period. And we may not be able to avoid having to complete that, but we are educators designed and geared towards providing that service, and the healthcare business is not something that we're good at, that we really know very much about. There are concerns about the sufficiency of funding included in the model, that some districts certainly are expressing that depending on how testing is approached, it could cost more to conduct those programs than the funding would actually allow for. Concerns about equity, small districts being able to pull this off relative to large districts. We have such varying experiences for populations across the state and within districts, really on access to this distance learning model that we've had for this way too long a period of time now, and other issues that not every school district is in the same position, not every student is in the same position. And then, of course, what's going on with the virus? This reopening is contingent on some standards for case rates in your county. Essentially, you could reopen in this model while the tier system would still have you in purple. And there's concern of two standards now and which one scientifically is really the most appropriate one. Also, a high interest in many corners about getting employees vaccinated. And there's also, as we watch the news, really widespread concerns about timelines around the vaccine being available and actually school district employees being able to receive it. And there's a lot of thinking about wanting to see return to school when people are vaccinated, at least extensively. So what's the outlook moving forward? The legislature is not going to get this stuff done in a week. Dates will be pushed back. There's certain to be changes given the input and the work through the legislative process. And who knows, we may see some different approach come to this, right? With the testing requirements, there is a call to remove that from the model that funds schools and actually pay for that out of revenue that should come with health services, so that the school districts are actually receiving money to conduct the normal school district business and not to conduct testing practices. So the dynamic around this is just a lot of question marks on it right now. So what's our approach to this Safe School for All plan option? So we're going to continue our preparations for reopening with the intent to meet the requirements of whatever the plan ends up looking like in the end. Our work aligns to a very large degree with what we understand so far. But one element of this plan option is that the safety plan would follow a template designed and distributed by the state. So we haven't seen that template yet. It's being developed. And so being able to complete a safety plan to fit into a template that we don't have our hands on yet is mission impossible. And we'll also be monitoring all the developments regarding what's happening in Sacramento, what the plan will look like, what's required of us. And as that starts to come together, we will come back to the board and ask for their guidance or decision on applying at the appropriate time. I just said a couple of minutes ago, we want to pursue every dollar that can support our efforts to get our kids back in school and recouping all the forms of loss that they have experienced during this time. So we don't know what this will look like in the end, but we are going to keep working with the intent of getting these dollars in the district piggy bank around here. So want to update you just on some of the general work we're doing, district planning, aside from what's happening with that Safe School for All plan. So we did receive a new document just on, I believe it was on Friday. This is the updated guidance from California Department of Public Health, which includes guidance that came from Cal OSHA and other entities. And so our task with this right now is to kind of line by line go through and make sure that all the safety planning that we've done up to this point in time aligns with this new guidance. There certainly are some differences that have been implemented that we're in the process of updating. What we'll see in the end, you know, we can't be sure that this is the last guidance document that we will receive prior to reopening, but we do expect actually that will be the case, just no guarantee. Mark mentioned earlier about all of the plexiglass on hand. We have a warehouse full of PPE, all of our MERV 13 filters. We've purchased HEPA filter units, air purifying units for every space where people congregate in the district, just about, minus multipurpose rooms. We have all the cleaning and disinfecting materials. So we are well stocked to bring our students and staff back into school. We've completed and distributed an extensive guidance document for our staff, indicating the protocols that will be followed if they're exposed, if they're positive. It's about a 3-page document. I'm not going to review that now, but it does provide a very clear framework for employees to be able to refer to if they have an exposure, if they test positive, including the provisions for return to work, which are important to be clear. Around instruction, we have been continuing to work with the Dixon Teachers Association negotiations. We've got draft instructional schedules that are crossing the table and continuing to be discussed. In the elementary setting, we continue working on an AM/PM approach. We are looking at all levels, structures, making sure that teachers and students are together 4 days per week. We want to the absolute degree, largest degree we can, keep students in smaller cohorts, or there's a new term, stable groups, that has begun to be used. So we will see changes certainly when we start to bring kids back in person, but the fundamental structures should not have any kind of significant change, especially in that elementary setting. All the support services are being planned for. We know that when we get back to in-person, there will remain some asynchronous instruction. We do anticipate having a 4-day per week of instruction involving synchronous time, continuing to have 1 day of asynchronous time. It allows our teaching staff in particular to prepare so extensively for what they're doing now. And we're also looking at addressing the needs of our special populations. There are options for small cohort grouping that can occur prior to a full in-person reopening. So we're exploring those elements as well. Previous direction that the board has set for us is that we would operate when we return to red, that would trigger our return, that we would be back in session no more than 2 weeks after the window for in-person instruction opens in counties near us. Back in the fall, that was a 6 to 8 week typical time. We would be able to turn that around no more than 2 weeks after. As we discussed before, we'd bring back grade levels or programs staggered. So it wouldn't be just elementary and then just middle and then just high. You would see a range in that first week, and next bullet says we do this on a weekly basis, that the first week you'd have some elementary, some middle, some high, and mix it up until everybody was back. And as it says, that week at a time approach. So 3 to 4 weeks maximum. So just to summarize on this, our direction on reopening has not changed in the slightest. We are committed to it taking place, absolutely. Safety has to be the first priority, we understand, and we have been working really diligently and again have the means to provide the safe environments here. Unless the Safe Schools for All plan lets us do otherwise, allows otherwise, and we are able to meet its conditions, we will be opening based on the return to red tier. So if that Safe School for All plan comes to pass and it lets us get open before we return to red, we will do that. Otherwise, we will continue on the path to reopening when we hit the red tier. And just again there, it's going to take several weeks to reopen once we start reopening. And we're going to have to stay flexible and continue to adjust. And final page here, changes coming next week for all students. Asynchronous Monday is shifting to Wednesday. That was something that we'd actually discussed back in the summertime as a possibility. And we settled on the Monday model, and typically our collaborative planning days. The shorter day had been on Wednesday. We felt at that point in time that Monday was a better option as we've experienced the distance learning model now and trying to balance asynchronous time with synchronous. We agreed with Teachers Association to move this to Wednesday. Part of what we like is that having 2 days of instruction and then an asynchronous day will allow for more meaningful, connected asynchronous work for students to experience. Async time has been a challenge for many, many students across the district at all grade levels. And we believe that by placing it in the middle of the week, it'll be able to be done more effectively. And then for John Knight students and Dixon High students, they're going to go to what looks like a much more traditional bell schedule, all their classes 4 times per week. This increase in synchronous time eliminates most of the async time. They'll still have a full async day. And in addition into our program through this agreement is the teachers, and this includes Main Prairie now, are going to have 4 days a week of designated time where they're obligated to reach out to families, to call parents and guardians and talk about how things are going for the student. And we want that time to be well used and reach out to students and families who are struggling, but also if things are going well, for families to be able to get that phone call saying, you know, Johnny is doing a great job, and I just wanted to let you know I appreciate his effort and those types of things. So those are the key elements to update you on tonight. I can take any board questions. I won't stop sharing my screen here yet. We do have Stephanie Marquez is on call to be able to talk a little bit from the principal's perspective on this shift in the model that we're engaging in next week with much more synchronous time. But I'll stop and see what you want to know.
All right, are there board questions? Do we want to hear from Stephanie? What's the board think at this point?
I have a question. So it says for the JKMS and DHS, the synchronous is mostly replacing the asynchronous. I think that that's good. And I think that due to this change, burnout will be an even bigger risk. So I feel like the synchronous time should almost entirely take up the asynchronous or homework, you can call it, like after the full 6 to 7 periods. I feel like that should be the end. Yeah,
you know, Lucas, you make a point that if I don't agree with it entirely, I'm very, very close.
Yeah.
There's right now, our students don't have a separation between home and school.
True.
And the async time, I think, is a big factor in that. And you know, kids are doing all sorts of different models, from sitting down during async time, getting up if your async time is in the morning, and using that time and doing it then, to having more flexibility and doing it later in the day, things of that nature. But the reality is, when school and home are at the same place, it's hard to have boundaries. And so I think people can feel like students can feel like they're always at school in that model. And what one of the goals that is in my mind for this is that students have a more structured schedule, which many are balking at right now. I can tell you that's a lot of the feedback we have coming from students is, I like the flexibility that I currently have. And the reality is, if we were in regular school, that flexibility wouldn't exist. But we do hope to create some boundaries. And while homework certainly remains in the realm of possibility, large-scale asynchronous assignments without any structured support from the classroom teacher, because it's independent work, has not been a good option for many, many students. So we do think we wouldn't do this if we didn't think it was going to be better, is what should be said.
What I'm saying is the just a balance needs to be the top priority. And I think that a lot of people differ in the way that they learn, and it's going to be a little tough to transition. So I think a little bit of leeway during the transition will definitely help some students that aren't as comfortable with this new way.
Agreed.
Great. Other board questions?
I would just like, I guess, confirmation that, under a best case scenario, of course, we move to red or better, and then we would be able to initiate some sort of in-person version. And then worst case, we go back to purple and flip-flop and all this, that could happen. Is this schedule have that sort of built in with that in mind to be flexible to go between full distance learning, partial in-person and whatnot?
Yeah, I think at this point we're used to adjusting on the fly. We would, part of what eventually we'll do is based on what's the guidance at the time. What are we required to adhere to? What might be suggested, but that we don't necessarily follow, because taking a different path would actually be a better thing for our students and their learning, and our staff and their work. Everything that we're doing is with an eye to when this changes and we do X, Y, or Z, how will this apply?
I just want to make sure the kids and staff don't have to learn a new bell schedule. That's basically. Right.
Yeah, got it.
All right, other board comments? All right, I'm going to move to public comment. Is there any public comment on this item?
Ellen, do you want to ask for Stephanie?
Yeah. Let's go ahead and, Stephanie, can you just give us a little rundown from the principal's perspective?
I can. I'm not very good at a little rundown. Usually it's a bigger rundown. But, I heard Brian speaking about asynchronous, and I hear Luke, and I've heard a lot of kids. I spent most of last weekend happily talking to kids, and gosh, it's still a pleasure. And just a quick shout out to my family that lets me do that all weekend, every weekend. So shout out to those guys. And the kids, Brian said we can change on the fly, and we are changing on the fly. And I know that in my meetings with folks, we're mad that we're changing on the fly, but nobody's more frustrated at change than our teens. And I think that, when I meet with them and I meet with their parents and do these things, I want them all to know that we get that. Oh my God, we know this isn't what you're built for. You're not supposed to be built for this. You're not supposed to be built for a year of your life stopping and then having stuff just happen to you. But I do know that the impetus for this change came from parents and teachers, and it really did. And I am so proud to be the principal of Dixon High School and my colleagues at C.A. Jacobs, because this came from teachers that said, I'll be honest, more recently with a loss of one of our kids, is that we just want our kids. We want to be able to see them. We want to be able to help them. We started in small groups, and that was great. But the schedule we currently have, we started in the mindset that maybe we'd go hybrid in 3 weeks, 4 weeks, and we didn't. So here we are, and we're doing distance learning. And I want all kids to know that your teachers and parents wanted to do something that makes your life easier, not harder. And I know what kids heard when I talked to them was that this is going to be more class time. It's actually not. While we gain 80 synchronous minutes per period, you are losing 100 asynchronous minutes per period. And that was super important to your teachers. Your teachers were having trouble figuring out how long something would take. They would assign something asynchronously. And remember, they were obligated to assign 45 to 50 minutes of asynchronous work for every period you weren't there to do their attendance. They were obligated to do that, not by this district, but by the state of California and the mean people there. And they would assign something that they thought would take you 30 minutes, and it took way more than that. And they were taking emails from kids that really were in a place to email their teacher, and we have kids that aren't comfortable emailing their teacher, and they felt awful. They didn't want to be doing that to you. And this was the same experience I had with parents. They said, what do I do? I'm like, call the teacher, they'll give grace. And they were giving grace. Teachers were also upset that they knew kids could not get help during asynchronous work. And parents were frustrated with that. I learned from my book club the word blurs day, and parents were living in the word blurs day every single day. They were like, is it A today? Is it B today? Is it, what day is it? Is it Monday, Wednesday? Do I have to go to work? How do I help my student? They have to watch their siblings. They have to go to work, all of these things. And for parents, they could not help their kids. I had a kid doing distance learning last year, and I gave up. I said, I hope you pass high school. I hope your teachers are nice to you. I'm quitting. I can't do it as a parent, even in my own house. So your teachers also want to be with you 4 days a week rather than 2. They know that those classrooms need to change to do that. Right now, your teachers see you one day and not the next, and they feel like they have to tell you everything in that one day. So now they can tell you everything in a little bit and give you some seat time and some time with your friends. We also heard kids saying they missed their friends. The A's missed the B's and the B's missed the A's. And they wanted their social life back. And our kids need their school's social life back. And for any kids here, I don't think for a minute that this is going to equal you coming back to campus. Nobody in this room thinks this is going to be the same or even close. But we're trying our best to meet your needs. When the schedule was presented to teachers recently, the first thing they asked, and I knew they would, and I'm proud of them, let's keep the homework manageable and minimal. Let's have a lot of grace getting into the schedule and seeing how it works. And then while I helped work on the work of getting this schedule, this wasn't my schedule. I like it, I'll be honest. I think it's good. But as the administrator at Dixon High School, if this doesn't work for our kids, I will be the first one at Mr. Dolan's door telling him, nope, this doesn't work for our kids, I promise.
Thank you.
Any questions?
So I would like to respect what Dyrene has written also and give her an option to have the full time. I know there was a limit thing going on, but I feel like this is a thing that needs to have more than 3 minutes. So if that's possible, that would be most
I would imagine we have several kids that want to speak also.
Yeah, I think I'm going to keep the limit of 3. I'm going to keep the limit right now of 3 minutes. I think that we have quite a bit of folks who want to comment on this, and I want to make sure everybody has an opportunity. Thank you, Lucas. I appreciate it. And thank you, Stephanie, for your comments. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead. If there are no more board questions, I'm going to go ahead and go to public comment. And I'm going to start with Betsy.
Ooh, somebody put a background on my computer. Sorry about that. Thank you. I originally logged on to the school board meeting tonight to speak in support of reopening when we do get a chance to in the red tier under whatever guidelines are available. And also to just share some feedback with the students and the teachers and the parents, and know that there's other schools that have gone ahead of us and they've returned to in-person instruction. We all know this, we're all familiar with this. And so I called a couple of very small school districts that have a similar number of schools that we have. And I've talked to some of their administrators about what they've done and what's been successful. Every single person I spoke to said that the kids have done a great job wearing their masks. The kids understand that's the ticket for them to be at school with their friends. Another thing that pretty much all of the districts told me is that finding substitutes is really difficult. And one of the school districts even got to the point where they sent out a call to parents, asking for parents to become qualified substitutes. So when we do return to in-person instruction, I would also caution everyone to know that things may change again. You know, if a substitute can't be found for your child, it's possible that things might not work out. Or, you know, if someone get sick and then people will have to go home and quarantine once we've started in-person instruction. I wanted to thank Mrs. Marquez for listening to her parents who communicated with her. I want to thank everybody, all the teachers who contributed to that. And I especially want to say that I think that based on talking to the other districts that I spoke to, the plans that you folks at the district have put in place for us to reopen with an A cohort and a B cohort seems like a great idea and something that would work well. And there was another thing I was going to say and I've forgotten it. I'm distracted by the background that a child put on my Zoom, so I apologize. Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, Betsy.
Thanks, Betsy. And I just want to note, if there are students or anybody else who has wants to make public comment, if you raise your hand, your Zoom hand, you'll show up in my queue here and I can call on you. At this point, I don't see any students in there, so that's why I'm just pointing that out. Michelle, you're next.
And just real quick, I'm keeping time. I'll call out when there's a minute. And then at 20 seconds.
I'm sorry, I meant to say something else, but I'm just
Betsy, you need to mute. There you go. Okay, go ahead. So have you heard that Brian's going to call out when you have a minute left? Go ahead, Michelle.
I had two questions. One, are there any parts of the Safe Schools for All plan that overlap with the work that's already been done by the district and the DTA? I know Mr. Dolan he said a small statement, but I was just wondering if there's things that you can check those boxes of like, oh yeah, we've done that, or we're getting there, that might take away some of the delay and some of the work that needs to be done. And my second question, for the reopening, operating on a weekly staggered schedule, over how many weeks would that take? I'm just wondering, are there going to be, those students that are still at home doing distance learning weeks after that first group returns? What's the timeline for how long it would take to get all the students back onto campus? That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Okay, John Guyer.
Oh, goodness. I thought we were going to hear Dyrene first, but I'll go ahead. I have to tell you, I'm extremely disappointed by the tone of some of the discussion tonight. I understand that, I've heard that we can open in the purple tier if we're so inclined. As Betsy just indicated, there are other districts who have done so. I know for a fact that the Rockland district, which is a rather large district, opened on the 19th, 5 days a week with 2 different groups going, and they have scheduled themselves to be back in school 5 days a week, all students, on April 6th. Now, and I understand we can open in the purple tier again, if we're so inclined. Several meetings ago, I think actually, I asked about the union negotiations, and we were all assured that things were moving along, we're making great progress, everyone has the same goals in mind. We see that, we hear that, but I gotta tell you, I'm not buying it anymore, okay? I'm hearing tonight the union head talking about making demands, talking about certain things that, that the union is looking for. What are we talking about?
John, you froze there.
Benefits, pension plans. What is it funding for distance learning? I'm not sure. I know you can't get into the specifics, okay? But I've also heard us talking about a decrease in enrollment. Okay, I have to tell you, there is going to be a decrease in enrollment. It's going to continue because we as a family, and I'm sure there are other families are thinking about it too. I may have to take my kids out of this district. Okay, when we have been seeing studies all over the globe talking about conclusions where children are not the large source of transmission, but if we have the proper mitigation tools in place, we can prevent in-school transmissions. It's not about just academics, okay? It's about socialization, emotional skills. It's about experiences. We want our kids to have wonderful experiences in life. And I'm telling you, this is not an experience for our kids. This is dreadful. This past 10 months have been dreadful. And they're looking at this continuing. We've got to bring the kids back to school, and we can do so safely. We absolutely can. So I have to ask, what are we talking about in terms of the negotiations? What's going on? Okay. And I'm just telling you, with the decrease in enrollment, it's going to increase. It just will. So I'd like the board to consider that moving forward, that, you know, at some point, we're just going to have to move on. So I thank you.
Thank you, John. Dyrene.
So yesterday, last night, I posted a letter on behalf of students to my Instagram, and as of now, it has about 600 likes, and people are reposting it. Parents are talking to me, students from other schools are talking to me, and sharing that they also feel the same way. So I'm gonna share it now. Dear Dixon High School. My name is Dyrene Chavez, and I am ranked first in my class of 266 students. An overachieving student, once filled with passion and determination, now dreading every 11:59 deadline. I was who teachers and students exemplified when they mentioned going to college, but now email me to remind me that I am not on the right path to even graduate. With that being said, my story is not much different from other students at Dixon High. On behalf of all students, respectfully, we are beyond exhausted, and even some sort of acknowledgement will be enough. There will not be any sort of formality to this letter because bluntly, conveying the raw and painful emotions of our student body is much more important than finding a way to make this letter seem respectful and conveniently acceptable. This will neither be a plea nor are we expecting you to find the cure for COVID. I understand this is your job, this is your livelihood and how you provide for your family. But in all honesty, this cannot be going on for much longer. I assure you the emails you send reminding us to take care of our mental health are useless. While the intent is there, most of these students, I guarantee you, are not focused on taking breaks or walking around their neighborhoods. They are trying to succeed in a literal pandemic with very little support. Even before this pandemic, it was clear there was an issue, but nothing was done. So ask yourself why students are being expected to take care of their mental health when excessive amounts of work are being assigned constantly. I'm positive this is not the first time you have heard of our struggles and feelings. And when you assure us that you too feel the same way as a teacher, in order to downplay our collective feelings gives us even less hope of being heard. I'm beyond embarrassed when I have to write email after email to my teachers about how difficult my household is. It makes me infuriated that in order to be even remotely assisted, students must be vulnerable about issues that are extremely personal to them. There is no absolute explanation as to why students must use their abusive households, lack of support from their parents, or any other personal reason to invoke a pardon from unrealistic amounts of work. Assistance should be given, not begged for. And after the recent passing of one of our beloved students, we expected change, we expected help. We were told we were being heard, but who exactly was being heard? Those who are not able to join a Zoom meeting because they have a job to help their parents out, those who pretend over a screen that they understand, they spend hours on YouTube and Quizlet barely managing to understand material, those who have siblings in the same room as them being penalized for not having their camera on, or maybe those AP students who are burnt out academically but are still held to that AP rigor. The point I am attempting to get across is the question of were your efforts enough, because for our student body, it simply was not. I want to make it clear that this is not directed towards any teachers in particular. There are countless teachers and administrators who have gone out of their way for their students. And thank you. Your effort to engage students without assigning work that does not take hours to complete does not go unnoticed. Thank you for understanding that school is not a priority at this moment, given this current situation of the world. Thank you for understanding our limits and working with us. However, your actions are far outweighed by those of your colleagues. Those colleagues who you know and trust are constantly discouraging us from trying. Your colleagues who have the audacity to complain about how much grading they have, even if they only grade each student's hard work for a couple of seconds at most. We are all experiencing the same pandemic, but not every two individuals are experiencing it in the same manner. If you have any sort of remorse or guilt, my job is satisfied. But do not continue to generalize each of our struggles just because we are mere teenagers. We are disgusted at this system that now more than ever serves the purpose of competition and unrealistic expectations rather than learning. I speak for our students when I write this letter. We want to be granted the same attention that we demonstrate our teachers daily. We want school, in any format, to be a place of learning and growth. Do not read this and continue the pattern. You are the authority. You have as much power as your students. If you read this letter and do not feel any sort of encouragement to change, read it over and over and over again until you are as furious as we are. And to seniors and fellow students, I'm beyond proud of you. I admire your dedication and perseverance. And in times like these, continue to enact change. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Irene. Wes, you had your hand up and then you took it down. Do you have a public comment on this? Okay. Any other public comment? All right, then we're going to close public comment, and Brian, let's go ahead and answer. It looked like Michelle was the one that had a couple of specific questions.
So her first question was, is there overlap between the work we're doing on our general returning planning and what would be required or what we can anticipate being required for the Safe School for All? Absolutely. There's a ton of overlay between the two. We don't know, again, what we will be looking at in final form from the Safe School for All plan, but no, a great amount of the work that we've been doing, much of the work that we've got finished will be usable. We do, as I mentioned, we do have new, as of just last week, new public health guidance, so there's some adjustments to be made there, but we do not start from scratch by any means when we get to the Safe School for All plan. Her other question was about how many weeks would it take? So if we're going to roll back into in-person with a group of grade levels or programs in week 1 and then another group in week 2, I think 3 weeks realistically would be the very fewest. I think 4 would be our target. So that we're talking about 4 grade levels programs per week. And we, obviously we want everybody back as soon as it's feasible. It's a matter of what does the final rollback actually look like, but 3 or 4 weeks is the intent.
Okay, great. Thank you. And I think that was all the actual questions we had.
Yeah, if I could maybe just offer a little clarification. John referred to Rockland and some other places. So the reason that they're in a reopening mode right now is because they had reopened in October, November, prior to counties returning to purple. So anybody who had reopened back in that time period is eligible even during stay-at-home time to remain open. So I did see at one period, I think they had an outbreak up there, and so they shut down, but they are very aggressive in their reopening plans in that community for sure, and others in that area. Placer County, and I don't remember if Rockland is in Placer County or in Sacramento, but Placer County in particular has been a Northern California area that many, if not almost all districts did get reopened back in the fall. So districts are not eligible to reopen in purple unless they were previously open.
Right. Okay, thank you. And as I mentioned before, public comment is concluded on this item, but if you have additional comments, you're free to email the board. Okay, we don't have any action on this item, correct? It's listed for action, but there's no action tonight.
If the board members are comfortable just saying, we established this direction back in November, we want to be reopened. If it can't happen until we're red, we want to be ready then. If it can happen through Safe Schools for All plan or something equivalent before then, we want to reopen then. That is what, as an administrative team, we're saying to you tonight. And just for the benefit of students and staff and community, if you want to affirm that, I think it would be a good message.
Okay.
Also, before we move on, I would like to say thank you to Dyrene for everything, and all of the students of Dixon High School and everybody thanks you.
Yep. Thank you, Lucas. Okay, so we're going to move on then to the next item, unless anybody else has additional board comments on this. Okay. So update on school support for socio-emotional and mental health needs.
Yeah, thank you. I'd like to introduce Adrienne Lauder. She is our Pupil Services Coordinator. She's an extremely busy administrator in the district, trying to coordinate our efforts to support students through this really difficult time. Dyrene captured it with one voice. We've heard it from many, many others. We also know that staff is struggling during this time. And so we've got some efforts that we have been undertaking. So Adrienne, I'm going to invite you to take it away, please. And thank you for being here.
Hello, board members and community members. Mark, can I have the ability to share my screen? All right, I think I'm able to. All right, so we are looking at the services that we provide through a multi-tiered systems of support. So it's identifying early which of our students need support and delivering targeted supports for our students. I'm going to focus on 4 areas of the MTSS systems, which is RTI, school and community collaboration, PBIS, and professional development. And so those are the areas we're going to be looking at. And then, you know, just to circle back, all of the services provided by the Pupil Services team and department are in line with last year, our last 3 years LCAP Goal 3, and then looking at our new LCAP Goal 2, which is to engage all students in social, emotional, and behavioral learning that ensures safe, healthy, and cultural responsive schools. So everything falls under and is in line with this LCAP goal. So in just looking, and you know, we heard from some of our students, staff, and parents, what needs are we seeing? And I really am going to focus on the needs that we're seeing during COVID, and then what we can anticipate post-COVID. So coming into this school year, we were seeing a decline in our suspension and expulsion rates. Really, that I attribute to the PBIS systems that our schools have developed and set up. And looking at post-COVID, we are really going to need to support our students in transitioning back to a full day in the classroom. Many of our sites revamped their PBIS expectations to fit into a virtual classroom at a virtual campus. And we're going to need to, again, have that opportunity to look at those systems, revamp them over the summer, utilize our contacts at the county and our resources at the county to come out to do some set visits in the fall, check in to see how those systems are operating, and then follow up again in the spring. And so with that, making sure that we're allocating, you know, we have moved through tier 1 and tier 2 PBIS and continuing to allow time for teams to collaborate, to continue to allow for PBIS leads, and also those boosters utilizing PBIS coaches. We are seeing students with a higher level of stress. You know, our numbers have increased in terms of counseling, but not that much in terms of last year, but just the needs of students are much more intense, sometimes where, you know, we are not equipped to even respond to them and having to refer them to outside agencies. So just being sure that we're able to anticipate that continuing, even though students are back in person. Really what we did for, you know, what this has done for some of our students is removing that safe space that many students have. School is that safe space. So they may be coming back to school, but that doesn't take away some of the struggles that they've had, you know, through the pandemic. So we'll have an increased need for counseling, an increased need for our social emotional learning groups. So to continue that. Students with a consistent schedule and students that have behavior plans right now. Those are things that really are implemented within the classroom. They have these behavior plans. Our behaviorists are giving resources and tips for families, but we're going to have to transition this to a school-based model. We're seeing work completion concerns during that asynchronous time. So that falls under that attendance. So, you know, where students are receiving a 1 or a 2, whether they're distance learning engaged or not engaged, they're struggling to complete their asynchronous assignments. Just really being sensitive of how we're going to support students with their attendance when they come back and they transition to schools when we return. We're continuing with our SARB model. We're continuing to meet with families and support them during the pandemic, but we're going to have to continue those systems when we are back. And then communication of resources. I think that's been a challenge during COVID. We offer so many services for our families. They're just not aware of what's out there. So really making sure currently, and then when we come back, families know what's available. And so using our wellness centers as a hub where we're able to do this, I'm hoping that we can increase staffing at our wellness centers. Currently, our team staff those centers, but if we can increase those hours, have a place where our families can go to learn about supports. They're right there, they can get that help immediately. I think that needs to be an area that we focus on for next year. And then rebuilding our relationships with our students. We are doing our best to maintain those relationships, but it's just not the same computer in front of a computer. So we had started some great work around our Healthy Kids survey, our REACH surveys, where staff set goals around relationships and monitored those goals throughout the year. When we come back, we need to continue that work. And so talk about how we can continue that work and focus on that throughout the year when we have our students in person. We need an increase for community resources. So we have so many families who are reaching out, who are struggling, specifically our families who fall into the homeless or foster youth category. One thing that we see in Solano County, there's just not a lot of resources, or they're hard to find. We have our parent liaisons supporting these families, but it's challenging to navigate those systems. CalWORKS is challenging to navigate. So again, this is where we can utilize our wellness centers when we're back in post-COVID and having a space where we can support these families. This year, one of the things that we've rolled out for our classified staff, and we're going to roll out next month for our certificated staff, is the wellness series. We have offered 2 sessions, 4 sessions total, but 2 sessions in December for our classified staff, 2 sessions in January, utilizing our asynchronous days. So staff have the opportunity to either complete the sessions during their workday or complete the session after school outside their workday for extended duty. And we've had great feedback from staff who've participated in those sessions. Staff has shared that they're utilizing the strategies that they learn in these sessions to manage stress, not only at work, but at home. So that's something we're going to continue throughout the year. I'm excited to roll it out to certificated staff. And again, I think this needs to be an area of focus for next year. And then finally, we modified our referral process. So again, this kind of fits with that communication piece in that, you know, in a normal school year, our teachers and staff have eyes on students every day. We don't have that luxury right now. So we opened up our referral process to parents and to students so they can self-refer, their parents can refer. But again, the bulk of our referrals are coming from staff. So getting that information out to parents to make sure they know this is available to them. And then post-COVID, just to continue to look at grant opportunities. We have been able to roll out wellness centers at all of our sites. We haven't actually seen the centers at our secondary sites. Students haven't been able to utilize them, but they are there, we have them. And so to continue to seek out grant opportunities to help mitigate learning loss, to help mitigate, the changes we'll see in terms of some behaviors we might see that we didn't anticipate before. So to continue to reach out to those resources. So looking at the services that we offer for all of our students, our PBIS programs, again, we have seen those suspension rates, a reduction in those suspension rates. It's really moot to talk about this year because we don't have kids on campus, but we were in a really, in a positive trend. We want to ensure that our staff still has that time to collaborate. And again, providing opportunities for the transition during the summer for them to look out how they're going to provide boosters for kids to make sure they're coming in and understanding what the school expectations are. Professional development for staff. I talked about our wellness series. We have also offered building relationships in a virtual world. We are going to be offering youth mental health first aid, behavior, brief drug intervention. So in terms of, in lieu of suspension for first offensive, if students have alcohol on campus or are found with a tobacco vape on campus, we can do this counseling intervention for them. And it's much more successful than utilizing a suspension. Prior to this school year, we adopted a CEL curriculum for our kindergartners and first graders, second step. During COVID, we've rolled that out to every student K-5. They're videoed lesson, they're not live lessons, but all students have access via their Google Classroom to a video lesson focusing on CASEL skills. We've continued with parent trainings provided by our partners at A Better Way, as well as we're rolling out Parent Project for the spring. We had started that last year, had great attendance, and then the pandemic hit. So we're gonna roll it out in February in a virtual format. Continue with our school adopted programs, The Leader in Me, Soul Shop, and then monitoring our suspension and expulsion data using SWIS. We wanna continue in a post-COVID to utilize our staff surveys and our student surveys to monitor how we're building relationships with our students, and then roll out universal screeners and progress monitoring for all our students. So we were planning this school year to roll out universal screeners for our 6th graders, 9th graders, and 11th graders, and look at doing universal screeners for our kindergartners. We halted that because of distance learning, but that's something we want to do next year. And so we have looked into a contract with MD Logix. They're using them at Golden Hills. And what MD Logix does is it looks at stressors that students may have, drug use, depression, and it flags students for those things. Then we can provide students those services either in-house, or it gives us a list of places in the community and resources in the community that may be able to support those students and their needs. And then looking at rolling this out with our primary students, we can better group them for supports. So really looking at their needs versus kind of having this gut feeling that these students need these specific supports. So for tier 2, when we look at intervention for some students, currently we are providing COVID stressor support groups for our TK1 students, 2-3 students, and students in grades 4-5. So these are small live group lessons. Students log on, they're with someone, it's interactive, they're able to work together. All students from each elementary site are mixed. And in these groups, you know, students have the ability to talk about just maybe their fears about wearing a mask, you know, their desire to come back to school, or any fears they may have about coming back to school. And it's led by one of our mental health interns in partnership with the county. In our transition, we want to continue these types of groups, but increase these groups. So we have utilized in the past our wellness center as a space to do that, but up the number of groups that we are able to provide for students. Looking at a cell curriculum for at the secondary level, we have contracted with Second Step to purchase a license for our middle school. And so at our middle school level for the remainder of this year and next year, we wouldn't roll it out district-wide, but again, targeting groups of students who need additional support with their social emotional learning or behavioral support. So small groups at the middle school level. Our community day program continues to use YTRI, which is another cell curriculum. During COVID, our students in the elementary schools have access to a virtual wellness center. This is a space that we haven't seen a lot of traffic. And again, you know, it's that communication with families. We're just not sure how many families are aware of it. We've posted things on Facebook. It's on our district website, but we are not seeing the traffic. But through our virtual wellness center, students have access to Mind Yeti, to mindfulness programs, quiet coloring pages, stories, and then they can also, their parents or themselves, they can make a referral to talk to staff. We'll transition into our live wellness centers. So students will have access to come in, they can self-refer, see someone at any time. In our wellness centers, we have access to trained staff. So students have that time to reset, and staff is there to see, you know, depending on the situation, some students might need a referral to our mental health team or behavioral support. And then check in and check out. We have been so fortunate because many of our classified staff has stepped up in terms of supporting sites with communication and reaching out to families, or adding to our team of people who students can check in and check out and have that time just to have a contact at the school site to talk to, you know, in the morning, how their day is going and how it's ending. We continue to monitor how these systems are working for our students, but we do need to enhance that. So, you know, I had talked about the universal screener for our kindergarten students, grade 6, 9, and 11. But when we look at these students who are referred to these groups, we want to screen them as well to ensure that these groups are effective. For our transition, we want to continue that communication that's currently happening. And then our SARB team had talked about the possibility of utilizing a Saturday school for SARB students next year. So we meet with our families, but being able to offer this time that would be a Saturday school. I know we've used it in the past. We've had programs in the past, but this would be specific to SARB. And working with teachers, the students are coming with work that they need to make up. So our high school students would be able to make up work and be able to recover credits during that time. And then looking at for FEW. So these are really more individualized services for our students who need that most intensive level of support. So individual counseling, we continue to offer that during COVID. I am really proud of the mental health team for their dedication in reaching students during the pandemic. That has been a challenge, and they continue to meet this challenge and work hard at serving their students. One of the challenges that they have shared is that, you know, our students have Zoom fatigue. It's hard to get on and meet with someone after you've been in class all day, but they continue to offer students that opportunity to meet via Zoom. It could be via phone, and some of our mental health clinicians are seeing students in person with social distancing guidance in place. So we need to continue that during our transition and enhance our partnership with agencies like A Better Way to be able to provide services through more kids. So again, during COVID, we've referred students to outside agencies, but that has been a challenge just in terms of those services aren't always available, and they have so many restrictions right now during COVID, but to continue to do that during the transition and make sure families are aware of what agencies are available. When we come back and using our wellness centers, I'd really like to have an opportunity for those agencies to come to us and to use our wellness centers as a hub for these agencies. We've talked about building, we've built relationships with Solano County Pride, SCO, A Better Way, and we can utilize our wellness centers as places where these agencies can come, meet with our students, and provide training to our families. Our SST and PBIS team, they continue to meet and review supports for students. We want to continue that during the transition. We need to ensure that we're providing them the time to do so and utilizing our leads to be able to do that. And then SARB, we've revamped our SARB, our School Attendance Review Board. And so we are asking our families really 3 critical questions when they come to us for SARB. And so those 3 critical questions are, what challenge is your child having with regular attendance? What supports does your child need? And then how can we help? And with those questions, we create an action plan for our students and set goals that we review when they come back. So we really look at that level of intervention as we want it to be a chance to work with our families and not so punitive, to be more effective. And then so for a post-COVID, utilizing a school attendance review board process. So making our teams at our school more effective, where they're able to sort of utilize that process in a smaller group at the school level, and hopefully eliminate the need for more referrals for the school attendance review board, and just offer more intensive interventions for our families. And then finally, just some highlights of this year. I talked about the professional development opportunities that we've been able to roll out to our staff, and that we will continue to roll out for the remainder of the year. Youth mental health first aid, assist training, looking for flags for suicide in our students, the wellness series for our classified and certificated staff, the brief drug interventions, a nurtured heart refresher for our staff, and then response to behavior interventions for our staff. So we're rolling out a variety of trainings for staff, and again, offering them multiple opportunities to be able to participate in the training during their async work time or outside of their work day. And sorry. In terms of parent trainings, we've continued to partner with A Better Way to roll out trainings for our family and parent project. And then our mental health team and behaviorists are working hard, providing counseling, asynchronous social emotional learning lessons for our students in K through 6, as well as social emotional learning groups, live social emotional learning groups. And we have now wellness centers at all of our school sites. Every single school site has their own wellness center. So really excited to have our grand openings for our secondary sites when we are allowed to do so. And then a big focus this year and hopes to offer our students more support next year is strengthening our community partnerships. So we are working with Solano County Office of Ed in a faith-based collaborative. It's led by Nikki Carr and Phil, our very own Phil Lockwood. And so the focus is bringing in leaders in our different churches in our community. And Dixon has been very active in this, because if you look at our churches, you know, we have people who attend who are former teachers, they're nurses, they might be retired and want to devote some time to our wellness center. So training those people, putting them through, you know, an interview process, just as if they were to apply for a job with the school district, making sure they're fingerprinted, but training them in youth mental health first aid and assist so they're able to help staff our wellness centers, offer that intake for students, trained in what to look for, and then able to make referrals to our students to outside agencies. We are partnering with Pride Solano. We rolled out our first district-wide, community-wide flu vaccine clinic this school year. We're going to be rolling out a Tdap clinic in February. We continue our partnership with Solano County Office of Education, A Better Way, and Solano County Mental Health. So that is really going to be a focus of ours this year and continuing next year. So questions?
Are there any board questions?
What percentage of students would you say are in each tier?
In each tier? Oh, well, I mean, that's a tough question. I can tell you, the number of students who we have receiving behavioral and intensive individual counseling, and I can talk to the number of students receiving groups. So our students, we have 129 students currently who are in that tier 3. They're receiving intensive level of support. So 129. Last year around this time, I think we had 115. So it's not a huge increase, but the types of level of service that students are needing, that has increased. And we're also seeing some of those students, because it's hard to get on Zoom, that they might skip a session for a week or two, and then they're in a bit of a crisis when they come back. But we are providing those students the opportunity, depending on their needs. Some of those kids we are seeing in person, some individually with social distancing in place. Some of those students we're seeing via Zoom, and some of those students are being seen over the phone. That's just their preference. For our tier 2 students who are participating in their small COVID support groups, those are about 36 students. So in a typical school year, you'll see more students in those groups, but with the pandemic, we've had a little more difficulty in our groups getting families on board. We were actually able to serve more students in those group sessions. We just didn't have the referrals. But again, that was another area we had great feedback from parents whose children did participate.
Great, thank you. Any other board questions? All right, seeing none, I'm going to move to public comment. Is there any public comment on this item? Doesn't look like there's any public comment, and so we'll thank you, Adrienne, for your presentation. And we will move on to our next item, the John Knight Middle School renovation project, furniture and equipment quote.
Thank you. Yes, this is a very quick item. When we previously brought furniture and equipment bids and contracts to you, we did not include the music room at that time, as Wenger is a specialty firm for those types of materials. So tonight, asking for your approval on an offer for $7,817.40. If you look at the backup, you see that there's a good chunk of the money here that is geared on music stands and carts to carry them. There's also a couple of larger items at the top of the page. Those are for Mr. Russo's throne. No, it's not a throne. It's a conductor stand and a well-designed chair for music instruction. So, and those will be there long after Mr. Russo. So asking for your approval tonight on that purchase, please.
Great, thank you. Are there any board comments or questions on this item? No? Okay. Is there any public comment on this item? All right, seeing none, I will entertain a motion.
I'll move.
I have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, there's a motion and a second. I'm gonna go ahead and do a roll call vote. DJ,
Aye.
Lloyd,
Aye.
Melissa,
Aye.
Jewel, Lucas,
Aye.
and I as well. Motion passes. And moving on to number 4, update of board policies and administrative regulations.
Thank you. This is the first set we present to you tonight for a first read. And as is typical with this, I will state the policy or administrative regulation number. I'll state its title, and I'll just let you know if it is based on a new law, updated regulations, or whatever the cause may be. So E1113 on district and school websites is simply a new tool to assist in what's required to be posted on websites. Board policy 3280, sale or lease of district-owned real property, is based on a new law. Board policy and administrative regulations 3530 on risk management and insurance is a clarification of existing guidance that is there. Board policy and administrative regulations 4119.11, 4219.11, and 4319.11. These are updates based on regulations out in Title IX related issues of sexual harassment. The next administrative regulation and exhibit 4119.12, 4219.12, 4319.12. These are regulation updates based on regulation updates as well. Again, Title IX procedures. Board policy 4157 on employee safety is based on new California law. 41.57.1 on work-related injuries is also based on new California law. Board policy 5113.1 and the administrative regulation of the same number, chronic absence and truancy, is based on new regulations, clarification of existing regulations as well. Board policy 5145.7, same number, administrative regulation on sexual harassment based on new law. Again, Title IX driven. Administrative regulation and exhibit 5145.71 on Title IX sexual harassment complaint procedures based on new law. Board policy 6161.1 and the administrative regulation and exhibit on the selection and evaluation of instructional materials is based on new law. And exhibit 9323.2, actions by the board, is a clarification of existing regulations on bidding. So I will entertain any questions on any of those.
So are there any board questions on any of these regulations, board policies? Okay. I will open for public comment or questions on any of the board policies and administrative regulations we just discussed. All right, seeing none. This item does not require action from us this evening because it's our first read. So we will move on to item number 5.
Yes, so the same process. This is from the December set of updates that we received. So administrative regulation 0430 is on the comprehensive local plan for special education, and this is based on a new law. Board policy administrative regulations 1312.3 on uniform complaint procedures. These are based on new regulations that were issued from federal government and state government. Board policy 4119.25 related administrative regulation on political activities of employees, actually based on some a case law update that was received. So policy driven by a court decision. Board policy 4140, 4240, 4340 on bargaining units is based on decisions that came from PERB, the Public Employee Relation Board. Where am I? 5113.2 policy and regulations on work permits is based on new law. 5126 awards for achievement is based on new law. Immunizations 5141.31 is based on new laws regarding immunizations. Said board policy 5148.3 preschool early childhood education, those are based on new laws. Graduation requirements 6146.1, these updates are based on new law. The 6146.2 certificate of high school equivalency is policy update based on new law. And board policy 6170.1 transitional kindergarten is new law. Board bylaw 9012 on board member electronic communications is based on new law. And board bylaw 9320 on meetings and notices is based on new law.
Great, thank you.
So again, I can answer any questions should you have them.
All right, are there any board questions or comments on those board policies and administrative regulations?
Yeah, just the last sentence of 6146.1 on high school graduation requirements.
Yes.
Says that authorizes districts to award a retroactive diploma to students who are in good standing and on track to graduate at the end of 2019-20 school year, but were unable to complete the statewide graduation requirements due to COVID-19. So I guess I don't have a specific question. I guess I'm just saying that how is that different, I guess, than the hold harmless grade policy that was sort of enacted at the end of last year? Or do we think this will affect DUSD greatly? Will there be a lot of kids who will fall into this bucket that will be able to retroactively get a diploma?
We wouldn't anticipate so, DJ. We will, once this is adopted by the board at the next meeting, we'll distribute this out. This would apply at both Main Prairie and Dixon High, of course, and they can review any of the non-grads and see if there are any issues related to this. So they'll do their diligence.
Thank you. All right, are there any public comments on this item?
I had a question.
Oh, sorry, Lucas, go ahead.
Yeah, so while we're talking about the graduation requirements and stuff like that, let's say that we don't get to go back in time and then we can't play sports this year. What are the requirements for sports and then doing PE time and stuff like that? Do we have those set, or is it just up to when we go back to school?
So we've had conversations around that, and it's a good question, Lucas, and you're probably the only student left in our meeting at this point in time. So you can pass it around, although we will be getting some information out here shortly. We'll know if there's going to be any sports that students can participate in this year or not. Some conversation about golf and cross country and swimming and track and field going on right now. We'll see what happens in the end. But Ms. Marquez and I have already begun talking through this, and we do believe that certainly for seniors and juniors in particular, there probably needs to be some accommodations made, and that may be looking backwards in time a little bit. What we won't recommend to the board is that students all of a sudden have to add a PE course into their schedule to meet a graduation requirement that they otherwise would have met by participating in a sport. And it's going to be hard to say, oh, I was going to play something but now I couldn't and grant credit. But it could be that we look back in time, and perhaps even if a student did a sport in 9th grade while taking PE9, we might be able to grant the credit that way, or waive those particular units. So it is on our radar, and we're talking about it. Once we know, really within the next couple of weeks here, probably, if there's going to be any sports here in this spring part of the year, we'll clarify what's going to happen there.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
I was wondering if you could even do something like independent study PE. I actually taught PE one year. Don't ask me why. But there was like independent study kids, and they were just almost filled out like an activity log. So I don't know if that's even like, worst case scenario type thing where you could still get PE credit and graduate.
Yeah, could be. Yeah. The idea here is that our students would have finished their PE requirement except for COVID, right? And some kids last year who played fall and winter seasons were able to do that. Kids in the spring didn't have that same opportunity. And again, we may have some spring opportunity, but it's not necessarily a student's preferred sport. So we'll be working on this and finding some flexibility. And we're going to run that by you folks before we enact that.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
Could be wrong, but in this year's budget, there was an exemption on PE in all districts. I remember reading it in the governor's budget. So I don't know if that got waived or not, or if it had some other clause associated with it, but.
As best I remember right now, Lloyd, thank you for surfacing that. That was around PE minutes. And we're really talking about this in the confines of graduation requirement. So especially elementary school has the requirement of 200 minutes every 10 days. And as I remember it right now, that was the element that was waived, but there weren't changes made on graduation requirements per se, but we'll double check it as we move forward.
Great, thank you. Other board comments before we move to public comment? All right, we have one public comment, Tammy.
Hi, I just have a question about if a student was enrolled in, so I'm going to use my daughter for example, she was enrolled in cheerleading for this year. They started going to conditioning, they started doing all that, she made the team. Is she going to get PE credit for that? Now, granted, she's only a 10th grader, so it's not like it's going to, possibly hurt her for graduation or whatever. I'm just wondering if credit is going to be given to students that were enrolled in a sport that did start and that they did try out for, but now because of COVID, it's been shut down. So that's my question.
All right, is there any other public comment before we begin to answer questions? All right, then I'm going to go ahead and close public comment and let's address Tammy's question.
Yeah, thanks for the question, Tammy, because other students are going to have it. That's going to be part of our conversation around, I couldn't give you an answer yet, and that'll be yes or no. Some programs have a much more structured approach to that tryout and kind of before their season starts activities. I think cheer is one that's a really pretty structured model, where others it's more casual or drop in or things like that. So we'll have to do some discussion around that and see what makes most sense.
Great, thank you. All right, again, this item doesn't require any action on our part, so we are just going to move on to item number C1, approval of employment contract for Brian Dolan, Superintendent of Schools.
Thank you, President O'Halloran, and good evening, board members, Superintendent Dolan. This item before you, with the essence and time, I will be very precise with this presentation. And this item is simply an extension of Mr. Dolan's last contract with no changes to the terms or conditions, in addition to no change to total compensation. It basically will extend the contract out to 2 years with an expiration date of June 30, 2023. And staff recommends this approval of this item as presented. And I can entertain any board questions or respond to any public comments or questions. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Cindy. Are there any board comments or questions on this item?
I know that last special meeting, we were going to have a specific conversation about one of the parts of this. I don't know if that had been resolved or.
Well, there haven't been any changes to the contract, to the previous contract. So I think what we talked about last meeting was that we couldn't have it in a special meeting because we couldn't approve this in a special meeting because you can't approve board contracts in a special meeting. So that's why we pushed it over and we're doing it in this meeting in a regular meeting.
So that specific element has been adjusted in this updated contract is what I'm saying?
There's no adjustment, and you're referring to total compensation. There's no adjustment.
Okay.
It's actually a replica of Mr. Dolan's last contract.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Is there any other public comment? I mean, a board comment or questions before we move on to public comment? All right. Seeing none, I'm going to move on and open to public comment if there's any. And seeing none, I will entertain a motion to approve this employment contract.
So move.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, and Julie, you're on mute. Sorry.
Oh.
But I got Melissa second on that one. So
That's okay.
all right, there's a motion and a second. And I'm going to take a roll call vote. DJ?
Aye.
Lloyd?
Aye.
Jewel?
Aye.
Melissa?
Aye.
Lucas?
Aye.
And I as well. So that motion passes. Thank you, Cindy.
Thank you.
All right, Mr. Giamonti, you are up with the approval of Williams quarterly report.
I was glad to finish with the shortest item. So our quarterly report for Williams, which reflects no complaints filed for October, November, and December.
Excellent. And so we need to take action on this item. Are there any questions first about the report or lack of a report? All right, any public comment? Great, I will entertain a motion to approve the quarterly report.
So moved.
There's a motion, is there a second?
A second.
There's a motion and a second, roll call vote. DJ?
Aye.
Lloyd?
Aye.
Melissa?
Aye.
Jewel?
Aye.
Lucas?
Aye.
And I as well, motion passes, thank you.
Thank you.
And last item on our agenda tonight is an update on maintenance and grounds activities at school sites. Mark, can you?
Thank you, board member, Superintendent Dolan. I won't be as brief as my two colleagues before me, but I will try to keep it under a few minutes. Just so you know where we are at today, at the high school, the trees in the front of the school, all the trees inside and along the student parking lots have been trimmed. The cleanup of the front parking lot or staff parking lot is complete. The cleanup of the student parking lot is about 75% complete, with the last part being at the furthest part of the parking lot. We still have the driveway to do and some trimming around there. We have not touched the back parking lot yet, and that will be on our agenda when we get a few days of non-rain coming up in the next couple of weeks. Over the summer, we have fixed no fewer than 7 large irrigation pipes at that site where we have broken T's or elbows. We just finished a 10-inch T at the irrigation pump that was completed a couple of days ago. The focus for our upcoming few weeks will be on the athletic fields, particularly the baseball and softball fields. At C.A. Jacobs, the trees and shrubs inside the campus have been trimmed. The lawns are mowed, the front is cleaned up and trimmed, and our focus will be in the next few weeks, whether it's in-house or outside. The trees along the bike path have some major work that need to be done. Whether we can do that in-house or have to farm that out, we will see. Along with the ivy growing on the side of the school fence that we will be cleaning up. Over at Tremont, We fixed over the summer a large 6-inch pipe in the front that had caused some problems about irrigation over on the CDC area. The lawns are mowed, the trees inside are trimmed along with the shrubs in the front. The trees along the back fence got their trimming. The nature area was cleaned up. And as of today, I'm hoping we picked up the last of the leaves over there as we filled the dump truck and took those away. At Gretchen Higgins, the inside has been all trimmed and cleaned up. The lawns mowed, the clippings picked up. We do have some work to do in the parking lot area. At Anderson, everything has been trimmed and cleaned up. The lawns have been mowed, including the area cleaned up between the last of the B wing rooms and the house right next to it. At Main Prairie, we've cleaned up the front, and in particular, we took a couple of dump trucks full of leaves and shrubs and trimmings out from the back side of the school. I would like to thank not only our 2 grounds workers who are working diligently to complete this task, down a couple of people, but all the custodians, TPMs, and campus monitors that help us clean up. At the high school, what's left is the front sidewalk coming up in this next week, and then that back parking lot. The maintenance team right now is in the process of building student plexiglass partitions or barriers so that we can get those out to the school sites. They also distributed all of the office and classroom air purifiers to school sites. On the 28th, we will get a training on the systems at the new John Knight Middle School. That's HVAC, electrical, fire, and intrusion alarm. We are, should be, I'm hoping in the next couple of weeks, getting power at the farm at the high school, in which case we have some more build out to do in the farm building there, particularly a bathroom over there, and some electrical work with a fan that has to go in. The maintenance and custodian teams are taking care of any corrections that were found during our fire department visit, our North Bay school insurance visit, or our fit report, which is our fitness inspection team. They are taking care of all those problems and have been and should finish up in the next couple of months. We will review the district asphalt status and possible line striping and crack sealing coming up for the spring, once we are sure that our rain is over. That was done, I believe, 4 years ago when John Calise was here. The report from Chris in HVAC is that he has finished up the MERV 13 filter replacement, and we are on a 90-day change out on all of those, with the exception being a couple of the filters in the larger buildings at the high school, which he will do shortly. So again, I'd like to thank everybody in maintenance and operation who has put up with my learning curve when I took over in late May, and has worked diligently to make sure our schools are cleaned and properly disinfected, and that our campuses look nice. Are there any questions?
30 board questions.
There's like a unspoken agreement that at John Knight Middle School, there's like community teams that help maintain and clean the like back fields and stuff. I don't know if that's gonna continue or maintenance is gonna add that to their docket now that it's an inhabited school.
Good point, DJ. So we do the main mowing of it. They do some extra mowing, and they being the Dixon Leon soccer team out there, along with fertilizing for the use of those fields. I was approached about a week ago with a similar group who would like to help maintain our high school baseball and softball fields. so that they can use them when our high school teams are not using them. So while we will do a bulk of the work, some of the minor stuff will be taken care of by those groups.
Thank you. Other board questions, comments?
Yeah, I have a question, a couple actually. One, have we implemented the plans to maintain our large equipment?
Yes.
I know that the plans came out, but so oil changes and all those things are happening. And then also, what are the plans, or if there are plans, and maybe it's a summer thing, to paint the fence at Dixon High School? That fence.
Correct. It needs it. The problem with the fence, and I know that John Calise looked at this, is you have to sandblast the fence prior to painting it. And that's kind of outside of the scope that we have the ability to do in-house. So we'll look at a couple of companies and get some prospective bids on that as to what we need to do to get that taken care of. But yes, the problem is not only is the paint gone, but we have rust. And so we have to get rid of that before we can get anything to adhere to it.
It's
okay,
that the fencing was powder coated back in the day, that you can't just paint over it and have it stick, basically.
So with sandblasting, and us repainting it, would we end up with that same issue years later, or will we be able to just keep up the paint?
My hope is that we would keep up the paint.
Okay. Do we have a time frame of when we can look at having that done?
It would be a summer project. We're doing some painting projects right now. We've done some painting at Tremont. And if you drive by Gretchen Higgins, you'll see some columns painting. So you will see some more painting jobs. And I also know that Montessori would like us to help them do some painting too. So we'll evaluate that. But yes, painting and our parking lots are on a yearly evaluation cycle, and we'll have to keep up with that and make sure we maintain that.
Okay, well, thank you. And thanks everyone for all your hard work.
All right, any other board questions or comments? All right, seeing none, I'm going to open for public comment. Betsy?
Thank you. I wanted to ask Mr. Monticello if you can respond, if any of the parents associations want to help out with school beautification or anything like that. Are there any requirements that we need to follow in order to set something up? I know there's a lot of restrictions right now because of the virus.
Great, thank you, Betsy. Is there any other public comment? Julie.
I just wanted to thank Mark again. I know the one group that he's talking to, and I remember years ago when the soccer was at the now John Knight Middle School, and I just think that that partnership amongst the community is super important. You know, people want to get in and they want to help, and these joint use agreements are super valuable, and they will be great fundraisers potentially for the sports program, which has been just decimated this year, but we'll get going again, and we're going to need that. So thank you.
Great, thanks, Julie. Susie.
Hi, I just wanted to piggyback off on what Mark said, and I want to thank all of the classified that have really stepped up during this time. We have 2 maintenance department employees right now. We're really down on our
2 grounds people, sorry.
Grounds, thank you very much. I was just going to correct myself. 2 grounds positions, and I know it's really been discussed a lot in the board meetings about keeping our campuses really nice and clean and appealing. So this wouldn't actually be occurring if all of the classified members hadn't stepped up and really, taken on some of these other tasks. So I really want to thank them for that, and Mark as well.
Great, thank you, Susie. Yeah, I think we all echo that, thanking the folks who are doing this work. It wouldn't obviously be done if it wasn't for them, so I really appreciate it. Okay, seeing no other
I'll
public.
join in that real quick if I may, Catlin. Yeah, I'll join in and really do appreciate the classified staff who, unfortunately for many of them, their normal duties they can't complete because of us being closed, and so really appreciate their willingness. And I just want to thank Mark. It's not too often in a school district where the superintendent asks, voluntold them, I guess might be the way that the IT guy needs to take over maintenance and operations, and he's helped us in this area previously. And, it's really demanding on him, and he's answered the bell very admirably. And it is nice to be able to say, compared to where things were, several months ago, the grounds really do look much better than they did. There's really obvious improvement, and that feels good. And I think it's important to our community that we show that we're taking care of our places. And we need to keep that commitment. And as we move forward, and get back to business as usual, our conversations around filling the grounds positions that have been vacant, that is our intent. That we have to get that staffing level increased. So as we go through budget development, you'll hear more about how we will meet those needs in grounds that we're able to fill right now just because of closure.
Great, thank you. And I'm going to try to be really consistent. And so since if you have additional comments that you didn't get to make in your first chance at public comment, I'd encourage you to email the board. I'm going to go ahead and close public comment and go back to addressing Betsy's question. Brian, maybe you can address this about what can parent groups do and how can they participate?
Yeah, so there is and Mark can pipe in, and she correctly pointed out there are obviously restrictions right now because of COVID. There is board policy that governs this issue. We also have to make sure that we're honoring our obligations to our classified unit, SEIU, and the nature of tasks that can be tackled by parent groups and volunteers. Sometimes we've had faith-based groups and such. Generally are the cleanup, beautification types of things. I can look at somebody on my screen who led an effort for our entire community a few years back. That was really a great day and massive undertaking, and eventually we didn't follow through and take care of what had been the work that had been donated in time that had been put in. Some things are cleanup, but when things get planted and placed in and need some maintenance and upkeep, we're just not being good partners when we fall short in that aftercare. So light painting, limited painting, and that could be things perhaps like picnic tables, lunch tables, those types of things. Not getting into buildings, not doing any kind of construction work. So it really, lends itself, these efforts lend themselves to things that really are kind of the appeal to the eye, curb appeal, those types of ideas. So should any of our organizations be interested as we get back into being able to hold some of these types of activities, where we will welcome them for sure. And it just takes a little bit of coordination on what's going to be done to make sure that it all goes fine.
Great.
I will reiterate with Brian that if any group wants to reach out to myself and or Brian, we'll entertain. There are some laws we have to abide by. There's some workman's comp stuff. There's some, maybe we have to make sure we're not taking work that normally is done by someone in a classified unit. I too want to reiterate Susie's point that a bunch of people stepped up to make all this happen. I couldn't be more pleased. I want to thank Julie for adding legitimacy to the group that reached out to me, so that once I knew she was part of it, it was smooth sailing to work with them. But we are going to have to focus on the high school track. along with the baseball and softball fields coming up. And I've already had Rotary reach out to ask me if they can do some work at John Knight Middle School, in particular the backstops that need some attention since they were ignored for 12, 13 years.
Got it. Great. Thank you. I appreciate that. And yes, if anybody has any desire to assist, please reach out to Mark. Great. All right. We have come to the end of our items on the agenda tonight. So I'm going to open it up now for agenda items for future board meetings. Do any board members have agenda items for future board meetings? Lucas.
I do. I would like to ask if we could do the addition of digital payment methods for the district, have a discussion about that.
Okay. Any other conversations that you'd like to have at board meetings, agenda items? All right, seeing none, let's move on to board announcements. Does anybody have a board announcement that they'd like to make? All right, seeing none, I'm going to read off our couple of coming events here. One, it's not just coming, it's already started, which is the Dixon High School Finals, which is the 20th through the 22nd of this month. And then our February 4th board meeting will be the next time that we're all together again. So with that, I will entertain a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
I'll second.
All right, there's a motion and a second. DJ?
Aye.
Lloyd?
Aye.
Melissa?
Aye.
Jewel?
Aye.
Lucas?
Aye.
And I as well. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone.